The city of Haifa and its harbor become the center of bitter conflict as the new Jewish state is born in the tense atmosphere of civil war. Haganah troops search for Arabs after capturing the city. Arab strongpoints are taken after being blasted to rubble. During the mopping up operations, Haganah forces seek out every Arab, and barricades are set up to screen those who had not already fled the city. Everyone is searched. With the relinquishing of the British mandate, Palestine is rocked by full-scale war, and both sides mobilize. Arab captives are held for evacuation to Acre. Women flee with what belongings they can carry. And as Palestine struggles for national existence, the conflict catches the inevitable innocent in its toils. Meanwhile, at Lake Success, the United Nations wrestles with the problem. Here, Sir Alexander Cadogan states Britain's unchanging stand on the mandate. Palestine's case is before the World Parliament as Arab delegates look on stonily. In a tense atmosphere, the Assembly hears a statement of momentous importance read by United States Delegate Jessup.
The United States recognizes the provisional government as the de facto authority of the new state of Israel.
With United States recognition, the new Jewish state is launched, and Zionist leader Abba Hillel Silver is congratulated by Soviet delegate Gromyko. An historic moment for Zion, which is celebrated in Washington at the office of the Jewish Agency for Palestine as a small boy runs the flag of the new Jewish state out on the staff. After 2,000 years, a Jewish nation once again exists. And while there is a rattle of gunfire in the Holy Land, there is cheering in Washington and Hebrew dances of joy for a Jewish homeland that has been reborn.
Whenever the innocent are killed by the global powers pulling the puppet strings of world war, all who have a heart for humanity feel the pain. We pray for the peace and comfort of those who grieve, both the victims of anti-Israeli and anti-Palestinian violence. This is the way that we express our own humanity, while at the same time avoiding any further discussion, therefore remaining politically correct. If we are to be biblically correct as well, then we also must consider that we are watching scriptural events unfold. And as we watch the progression of these events through a glass dimly, we have to ultimately make peace with a few facts ourselves, one of which is the fact that if the unseen hand is always at play within global politics, then the conflict concerning Israel would certainly be no exception. Most importantly, we who are of faith also hold the Scripture as our plumb line and know that by hook and by crook, peace in that land will be established in the last days. Therefore, it is planned as well as written that this too must pass. There are some who side with the Palestinians, and we hear their arguments. Many more of the popular media voices that we hear seem to echo pro-Israel sentiments. We also hear the opinions of those who may not be pro-Israel, but are anti-Palestinian. We do not hear very many opinions from experts who may not be pro-Palestinian, but are critical of the Israeli state. Both sides are equally guilty of committing comparably questionable military practices and atrocities of war, because neither side is born with some inherent genetic ability to be more evil or pious than the other, despite the given narratives. The unspoken issue which causes confusion and intentional polarization is that we in the U.S. seem to hear more explicitly from those on one quote-unquote side than the other. So much so that when a pundit is allowed to speak on behalf of the pro-Palestinian issues, they come off as inherently defensive, even to an unbiased observer like myself. Add to that the deplorably deceptive use of the Holocaust as a blanket excuse for seemingly every act of war, which is a most disrespectful form of deflection/gaslighting that also diminishes the memories of those who were most directly affected by that horrifically traumatizing and demonic event. For the majority of my 50 years, I have heard the suspiciously common tales and accusations of other countries attacking, quote-unquote, their own people. This has been the usual excuse given for our country going to war over the past few decades. I am an American. I am a Bible believer. So I have a right to gain more of an understanding about Israel, as both designations have obligated me to support them. Asking questions does not make me anti-American, anti-Christian, or anti-Semitic, especially if we start with an understanding of what the term Semitic means. It just makes me a person who wants to be more responsible and informed than the masses are generally allowed to be. Those who expand their scope of understanding beyond simply what is given to them by major news distributors also see a lot of hypocrisy surrounding the subjects of Israel and Palestine, especially during times of war. The U.S. and Israel both seem to be the only two countries who never seem to engage in war crimes, in using human shields, killing the youth, or attacking its own people. Yet, these inhuman and inhumane practices are par for the course in the theater of warfare. Unfortunately, so is the practice of lying to the general public about the real reasons for war and other such major, controversial, and destructive political moves. Let us consider the years leading up to the UN making of the modern nation of Israel. The 2 years leading up to the United Nations Partition Plan for Palestine, 1945-1947, were marked by significant events and tensions in Palestine. Here's an overview, focusing on key events and the state of affairs during that time. We have to start with a historic understanding of how the modern Israel came to be before we can ask and answer the pertinent questions about who Israel was biblically, as we will come to find significant differences between the Israel of Scripture and the Israel we hear in conflict on the nightly news. This is not a new subject for this channel, and I encourage the listeners to check the hundreds of videos posted during the 10+ years this channel has existed on YouTube for more information, if needed. But in this basic overview, I want to equip all the viewers with a basic math level, scholastic understanding before we move into the algebra level aspects of the matter. End of World War II, 1945. The end of the war saw an increased desire among Holocaust survivors from Europe to immigrate to Palestine, adding pressure on the British authorities overseeing the region under the British Mandate. Arab-Jewish relations. The period was marked by escalating violence between Jewish and Arab communities. This included attacks, retaliations, and mutual suspicions. Jewish resistance and British response. Jewish underground organizations like the Haganah, Irgun, and Lehi increased their activities against British rule. Notable incidents included the bombing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem in 1946 by the Irgun. Quote, "This was not just an attack on a military target, but a deliberate attempt to destroy a place which was frequented by many innocent people." British statement after the King David Hotel bombing. Source: British Government Reports, 1946. The Anglo-American Committee, 1946. To address the Palestine issue and Jewish immigration, Britain and the U.S. formed the Anglo-American Committee. The Anglo-American Committee, 1946. To address the Palestine issue and Jewish immigration, Britain and the U.S. formed the Anglo-American Committee. The committee recommended the allowance of 100,000 Jewish refugees into Palestine and that the region should neither be turned into an Arab nor Jewish state. Quote, "In order to dispose once and for all of the exclusive claims of Jews and Arabs to Palestine, we regard it as essential that a clear statement of principle should be made that Jew shall not dominate Arab and Arab shall not dominate Jew in Palestine." Recommendation from the Anglo-American Committee. Source: Report of the Anglo-American Committee of Inquiry, 1946. The Morrison-Grady Plan, 1946. Proposed by the British and U.S. governments, this plan aimed to divide Palestine into Jewish and Arab provinces, with Jerusalem and Bethlehem under international trusteeship. Both Jews and Arabs rejected the plan. Arab League's stance. The Arab League, formed in 1945, opposed the establishment of a Jewish state and supported the rights of Palestinians. Zionist diplomacy. Jewish leaders lobbied for international support for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine. The Biltmore Program, adopted by the World Zionist Congress in 1946, called for unrestricted Jewish immigration to Palestine and the establishment of a Jewish Commonwealth. General Strike and Rebellion, 1946. Arab leaders in Palestine called for a general strike, which later transformed into violent confrontations against the British. Exodus, 1947. Incident. A ship carrying Jewish immigrants, named Exodus 1947, was intercepted by the British. Its passengers were forcibly sent back to Europe. This incident garnered significant international attention and sympathy for Jewish refugees. British referral to the UN, 1947. Given the escalating tensions and the lack of a viable solution, Britain decided to refer the matter of Palestine to the United Nations in 1947. Quote, His Majesty's government have of themselves no power, under the terms of the mandate, to award the country either to the Arabs or to the Jews, or even to partition it between them. Statement from the British government. Source: British government announcement referring Palestine issue to the UN, April 1947. The 2 years before the partition plan saw Palestine undergoing significant turmoil, with tensions escalating between Jews and Arabs, both groups pushing for their respective visions of the future of the region, and Britain, exhausted and eager to divest itself of the problem, seeking an international solution. The Exodus, 1947. Incident. The Exodus 1947 incident is one of the most notable events in the lead-up to the establishment of the State of Israel, playing a significant role in drawing international attention to the plight of Jewish Holocaust survivors seeking refuge in Palestine. Here's an overview. Background. After World War II, many Jewish survivors of the Holocaust were housed in displaced persons, DP, camps in Europe. Desiring a new life, many sought to immigrate to British-controlled Palestine. However, British policy, influenced by the White Paper of 1939, severely restricted Jewish immigration. The ship, Exodus 1947, was a ship originally named SS President Warfield that was acquired by the Haganah, a Jewish paramilitary organization in Palestine, to transport Jewish DPs from Europe to Palestine. Departure. The ship left the port of Sète, France, on July 11, 1947, carrying over 4,500 Jewish refugees, including around 1,600 men, 1,282 women, and 1,672 children and infants. British interception. Anticipating this illegal immigration attempt, the British Royal Navy was on alert. When Exodus 1947 neared Palestinian shores, British destroyers intercepted it. On July 18th, after a brief but violent confrontation, during which 3 of the ship's passengers were killed and several were injured, British naval forces took control of the ship. Quote, I couldn't believe the Royal Navy was ramming us. It was like a bad dream. I was shocked by the aggression. Bill Bernstein, crew member of Exodus 1947. Source: Interviews with Exodus survivors, various publications. Aftermath of the interception. The refugees were transferred to 3 British vessels. Initially, the British government intended to send them back to France. However, upon arrival at the port of Toulon, the refugees refused to disembark, and the French government declared it would only allow them ashore voluntarily. Forced return to Germany. Given the refusal of the passengers to disembark in France, the British government made a controversial decision to return them to Germany, which was then under Allied occupation. The refugees were forcibly disembarked at the ports of Hamburg and Poppendorf in the British zone of occupied Germany. Quote, "To send these people back to Germany, from where they have just been liberated, is not only inhuman, but is like sending the victim back to the scene of the crime." David Ben-Gurion, then head of the Jewish Agency. Source: Public statements and speeches of David Ben-Gurion and various archives. International outcry. The forced return of Holocaust survivors to Germany drew widespread international condemnation, highlighting the predicament of Jewish DPs in Europe and British immigration policies in Palestine. Significance. The incident and its aftermath played a significant role in turning global sympathy towards Jewish refugees and increasing support for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine. It showcased the desperate measures Jewish survivors were willing to take to find a home and the extent the British mandate was willing to go to enforce its immigration policy. The Exodus 1947 incident remains a symbol of post-Holocaust Jewish migration and the broader struggle for the establishment of the State of Israel. Never let a good crisis go to waste. While this idea has been attributed to various individuals throughout history, in contemporary American politics, it's most famously associated with Rahm Emanuel, who served as Chief of Staff under President Barack Obama. In 2008, Emanuel said, "You never let a serious crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that is, it's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before." Hillary Clinton has also expressed similar sentiments. For instance, in a March 2009 address at the European Parliament, she said, "Never waste a good crisis. Don't waste it when it can have a very positive impact on climate change and energy security." The general sentiment behind these statements is that crises, while challenging and often tragic, can also create opportunities for reform and change that might be hard to achieve in more normal times. Those who critique the establishment of the State of Israel point to both religious and biblical inconsistencies. Unbiased observers dispute the validity of the UN's claim to desire fair resolutions and see the move as evidence of a phantasmic favoritism. This alleged bias cannot be discussed in mainstream media, at least not in this country, without fear of being accused of having nothing less than hatred or murderous intent. It should be dubious at best to any objective observer that the only time we hear or read of an individual questioning the origin and/or motives of an admittedly united group, they are psychos and supremacists. That individual, and subsequently their claims, become devalued and dismissed. The inability to question any group that has some degree of unified influence should at least be a cause for general concern. So forgive me for my inability to dismiss the inconsistency in this particular piece of history. Now, if the scripture is correct, where there is confusion, there is bondage to devils, and we need the truth to make us all finally free. As of today, October 17th, 2,000 American troops are slated to be sent to aid Israel in the present Gaza conflict. American tax dollars to Israel, U.S. financial aid to Israel, has been a topic of debate and controversy for many years. Here's an overview of the key points surrounding this issue. U.S. financial aid to Israel, background and controversy. Historical context. The U.S. began providing financial aid to Israel soon after its founding in 1948. Over the decades, Israel has become one of the top recipients of U.S. foreign aid, receiving funds primarily for military and defense purposes, but also for economic support. Amount. Israel typically receives around $3.8 billion annually from the U.S., largely under a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, signed in 2016 during the Obama administration. This MOU commits the U.S. to provide $38 billion over 10 years, 2019-2028. Quote, "Both Prime Minister Netanyahu and I are confident that the new MOU will make a significant contribution to Israel's security in what remains a dangerous neighborhood." Former U.S. President Barack Obama, 2016. Source: Remarks by President Obama on the MOU signing, 2016. Arguments in favor of Eid, strategic partnership. Proponents argue that Israel is a key U.S. ally in the Middle East, serving as a democratic and stable presence in a volatile region. Shared interests and values. Many believe that the U.S. and Israel share common democratic values and interests, such as countering terrorism, economic returns. Some point out that much of the military aid is spent on U.S. defense contractors, thus benefiting the U.S. economy. Arguments against the aid. Use in conflicts. Critics argue that U.S. aid supports Israeli actions in the Palestinian territories, which they view as human rights violations. Budget priorities. Some believe that the U.S. should redirect foreign aid funds to domestic programs or other international needs. Conditional aid. Others propose that aid should be conditional based on Israel's policies, particularly regarding settlements and treatment of Palestinians. Quote, "The U.S. funding for Israel has come under scrutiny in recent years due to Israel's continued occupation of the West Bank."
On the eve of the Festival of Freedom, Passover, President Ben-Zvi welcomes in his Jerusalem home a delegation of Egyptian refugee immigrants expelled by Nasser because they are Jews. For them, this year's Festival of Passover took on a special meaning. The refugees are coming in at such a rate that some are given temporary shelter in the Ma'abarot, the transit camps. But gradually they move into permanent houses which the government and the Jewish Agency are building as fast as possible to keep pace with the mounting flow of immigrants. Here, this newly arrived Egyptian Jewish family prepares for the Passover festival with a special ritual of cleansing. And on the first night in every Jewish home, there is a special service called Seder, in which families relive the ancient exodus of the Jews from Egypt and their harsh taskmasters. The head of the household holds up this bread of affliction eaten by the ancient Israelites. Then, by tradition, the youngest child asks, why is this night different from all other nights, and is told of Jewry's bitter history of persecution and liberation. Also visiting Israel this month and taking a look at the new Lachish development area are the two daughters of the French Prime Minister, Guy Mollet. Youth calls to youth, and they drive through the area with a group of young Israel pioneer settlers. On a visit to Kibbutz Negba, they see the monument erected to the memory of those who fell in defense of the settlement against Egyptian attack in 1948. Miss Selina Sokolov, daughter of Nahum Sokolov, the great Zionist leader and man of letters, inaugurated the Israel Journalists Association new press club in Tel Aviv this month. The main address was given by Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion. The club is called Sokolov House. For the first time in their history, the International Council of Jewish Women held their World Conference in Jerusalem. A distinguished audience, including the 80 delegates from 15 countries, heard an address by the only woman foreign minister in the world, Mrs. Golda Meir of Israel. She spoke of the outstanding part played by women in building this country. French artist Valentin Derrier holds a one-man show of oils, watercolors, and black and white drawings of Israel types. Most popular were his old Sephardi Jew, the youthful first secret, and his Bedouin shepherd girl. Soldiers and civilians took part in a march to Jerusalem this month, reviving the ancient traditional pilgrimage of the ascent to the capital before Passover. Male soldiers marched 40 kilometers a day in full pack and rifle for 4 consecutive days, and they underwent toughening up training before the event. From all over the country they came, and rendezvoused on the last night in the Judean hills. As they swung their way past new immigrant settlements, children came out to greet them with sweets and spring flowers. The 40 kilometers each day had to be completed in 7 hours with 2 rest periods of 20 minutes. Here they were given oranges and milk by the delighted villagers. Youth cadets called Gavna and civilians marched for 2 days. This cadet unit had a monkey as their mascot. But the girl soldiers stole the show, bright and smart with a spring to their march. Many kibbutzim sent youth contingents. The bus drivers cooperative also sent a contingent, and they were followed by overseas students who are here on a year's visit. The old folk participants got a special hand. One marcher was over 70. 2 cups were given to the winning boys and girls team, gaining most points for style, grace, spirit, and zest.
Blockade of Gaza. Source: various news articles and op-eds discussing U.S. aid to Israel. Legislative aspects. U.S. financial aid to Israel has generally garnered bipartisan support in Congress. However, there is a growing discourse, particularly among progressive Democrats, calling for a more conditioned approach to aid. Tax deductions. Separate from direct government aid, there's also been controversy over U.S.-based charitable organizations that support Israeli causes, including settlements in the West Bank. These donations are tax deductible, leading to debate over whether U.S. taxpayers are indirectly supporting activities that may be at odds with official U.S. policy. Comparative perspective. While Israel receives a significant portion of U.S. foreign aid, it's worth noting that the U.S. also provides substantial aid to other countries, including those who are allies within the Middle East. Egypt, undoubtedly because of its occult and Masonic significance, for example, has historically been the second largest recipient of U.S. military aid after Israel. When the State of Israel was established in 1948, it was immediately met with military opposition from its neighboring Arab states. One of the most influential and vocal critics was Gamal Abdel Nasser, who would later become the president of Egypt. Here's a look at the criticisms from Israel's influential neighbors, highlighting those from President Nasser.
Can you envision a situation where the United Nations might simply supervise the borders, however, and leave Egypt in full occupation of its territory, that is, the Sinai Desert? Can you envision a United Nations force patrolling the borders, at least in the early stages of a peace settlement, in order to avoid incidents?
Well, I think these are details to be discussed to achieve the peaceful solution. You know, in 1956, the recommendation of the United Nations was to have a police force, international police force, in the Israeli side and in the Egyptian side. But there was only one condition, that's to have these troops with the consent of the countries. We agreed. Then the Israelis refused. And then the police force continued for 10 times. When we asked the withdrawal of the police force, well, there were protests from the Israelis that we asked the withdrawal of the police force. But they refused to say, or people forget to remember that they refused 10 years ago, or more than 10 years ago, to have police force there. By having the police force on either side, this will give security to everyone. If they don't consent to have the police force, there will be police force on our side. If we withdraw the police force, there will be police force on the other side of the borders.
I see. The question comes down then to this point, it seems to me. What measures would you take to provide the secure borders that is mentioned in the United Nations resolution? What measures would be taken? Simply the
criticisms of Israel from its neighbors, 1948 and onward. Denial of Palestinian self-determination. Israel's creation was seen as denying Palestinians their right to self-determination. Source: United Nations debates and resolutions on the Palestine issue. Displacement of Palestinian Arabs. The 1948 war led to the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs, a point of significant contention. Source: Arab League statements and resolutions. Territorial expansion. Arab states opposed Israel's territorial gains during and after the 1948 war. Source: Statements from Arab leaders following the 1948 war. Jerusalem. Israel's control over West Jerusalem, and later, after 1967, over East Jerusalem, was a contentious issue, given the city's significance to multiple religions. Source: Arab League Summit Declarations. The nature of the state. The establishment of a Jewish state, as opposed to a state for all its inhabitants, was a point of contention. Source: various Arab leaders' speeches. President Nasser's criticisms. Zionism as imperialism. Nasser believed that Zionism was an extension of imperialistic designs on the region. Quote, Israel represents imperialism in the Middle East. Source: speeches by Gamal Abdel Nasser. Denial of historic Palestine. Nasser believed that the establishment of Israel denied the history and rights of the Palestinian people. Source: Nasser's public addresses and letters. A threat to Arab nationalism. Nasser viewed Israel as a challenge to Arab nationalism, an ideology he championed. Source: Nasser's speeches promoting Arab unity and nationalism. Nuclear concerns. Nasser expressed concerns over Israel's potential development of nuclear weapons. Source: Nasser's statements during the 1960s. Challenge to Arab unity. Nasser felt that Israel's presence hindered the unity of Arab states. Source: Pan-Arab conferences and Arab League meetings where Nasser spoke. Water rights. Nasser was concerned about Israel's control and usage of regional water resources. Source: statements. During the lead-up to the Six-Day War in 1967, support from Western powers, Nasser criticized the backing Israel received from Western nations, particularly the U.S. and the U.K. Source: Nasser's speeches on colonialism and imperialism. Direct military threat. After the nationalization of the Suez Canal, Nasser saw Israel, in alliance with the UK and France, as a direct military threat, leading to the Suez Crisis in 1956. Source: historical accounts of the Suez Crisis. Criticisms from other neighboring states. King Abdullah II of Jordan, concerned about the partition and the potential influx of Palestinian refugees into Jordan. Source: historical correspondences of King Abdullah I, Syria, criticized the loss of Palestinian lands and saw Israel as a regional aggressor. Source: statements from the Syrian government during and after 1948. Iraq condemned the establishment of Israel as an infringement on Palestinian rights. Source: speeches by Iraqi leaders post-1948. Lebanon, concerns over territorial integrity and the influx of Palestinian refugees. Source: statements from the Lebanese government in 1948. Saudi Arabia, King Ibn Saud expressed solidarity with Palestinian Arabs and opposed the establishment of Israel. Source: historical correspondences between King Ibn Saud and U.S. leaders. Yemen, Libya, and Sudan. These nations, although not direct neighbors, joined other Arab states in the collective condemnation of Israel's establishment. Source: declarations from Arab League summits. General Pan-Arabism. The idea of a united Arab response against the establishment of Israel was promoted by various leaders, including Nasser. Source: Arab League conferences and the Baghdad Pact discussions. These criticisms and concerns played out in various forms, from diplomatic rebukes to full-fledged wars. The dynamics of the Middle East, particularly concerning modern-day Israel and its neighbors, remain categorically complex and have evolved over time. Gamal Abdel Nasser, the second president of Egypt and a significant Arab nationalist leader, is known to have made a comment about Jews returning to the Middle East black and coming back white. The comment was in reference to the demographic and physical differences between ancient Hebrews and the European Jews who migrated to the region in the 20th century. In a 1952 speech, Nasser reportedly said, quote, "You know very well, and the stupid Americans know equally well, that we are not after the Jews. We are after the Zionists. We shall not denounce the Jews. We will denounce, and have denounced, the Zionists, who are a small but dangerous group. I know that even among the Jews, there are anti-Zionists who declare, the Zionists do not represent the Jewish people. It is the Ashkenazi Jews, who are European in origin, who went to America and took American nationality and returned. They are the real aggressors in the aggressive movement. They were the people who were the Nazis, the Hitlerites. They are the real enemies of the Arabs. It is they who must be destroyed, and not the Jews. It is they who attacked from Europe in the guise of Americans, with American money and American arms, with the knowledge of America and at her instigation. But we know they are originally European. I met an American student who told me that the Israelis do not resemble the Arab Jews, but are rather a mixture of all races. They left black and returned white." Unquote. Nasser's comment highlights the complexities of the Israel-Arab conflict, with its mix of political, religious, racial, and historical undertones. It's essential to interpret such remarks within the broader context of the political and social climate.
Welcome. Once again, you're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. And folks, I'll be in the San Francisco Bay Area October 29th through the 31st at the Dunphy Hotel, San Mateo, California. The number to call is area code 415-905-8874. That's area code 415-905-8874. Let me see, I'll be doing a lecture on Sunday, October the 31st at 12:30 p.m. Also a workshop later that same afternoon, October the 31st at 3:30 p.m. But I'll be there the whole weekend. We'll have a booth. We'll have tapes of the Hour of the Time there. They'll be at a reduced rate because you won't have to pay postage. And my book will be available. And, of course, I'll be there if you just want to stop by and chat for a while. Remember, that's the Dunphy Hotel, San Mateo, California, October 29th through the 31st. The number to call is area code 415-905-8874. For those of you in the southeast segment of the United States, I will be in Atlanta, Georgia on November the 14th. I will be speaking in the Chamblee Community Center on that date, and the number to call is area code 404-986-0802. Once again, November the 14th in Atlanta, Georgia. I'll be speaking at the Chamblee Community Center. The number to call for information is area code 404-986-0802. Now, both of these events in San Mateo and in Atlanta, Georgia cost some money. I don't know exactly how much because I'm an invited speaker. You need to call those numbers and talk to them. But as usual, when I get there, I will arrange for a lower rate for CAGI members. Make sure you bring your welcoming letter, anything signed by me, or your press credentials, and that will be good for your discount. If you have any problems, come and see me personally. I'll verify that you're a CAGI member and make sure that you get your discount. Well, folks, tonight is going to be illuminating. I can tell you that for sure. Let me tell you first, right off the bat, before we get into the subject of tonight's broadcast, that the media corporation, well, first let me give you what happened on the stock exchange since we've been talking about this. All the stock for all the media corporations that we've discussed, including the Inquirer Star Group, has gone up. So it shows that somebody may be doing a little anticipatory buying out there, or it could just be an accident. The stock that we're going to purchase closed today on the New York Stock Exchange at $51 5/8 per share. That's $51 5/8 per share. The name of the corporation is the Gannett Company Incorporated. Seek out the lowest commissioned broker in your area, ladies and gentlemen. Buy as much stock in that company as you possibly can. The New York Stock Exchange symbol is GCI. GCI. Again, it's Gannett Company Incorporated. You want to make sure to tell your broker that you want to purchase only voting shares. Only voting shares. Do not buy stock unless the stock is voting shares. Make sure that you understand that perfectly. As soon as you've purchased your stock, make Xerox copies of your stock certificates. Make sure your broker knows to issue the certificates in your name. That way you know that you own the stock, you have the shares in your possession. Make Xerox copies of the shares, send them to us with a stamped, self-addressed number 10 envelope. We will send you back a proxy statement, which you will need to fill out, have notarized, and send back to us, giving us the proxy vote for your shares of stock. So, folks, you can get started on that tomorrow morning. We will be keeping you updated. We'll tell you if stock starts going up too precipitous, we'll tell you to hold off and until it comes back down. But this is not going to take a week or two. It's going to take us some time to do it. You need to motivate your neighbors, your friends. You need to get them involved. You have to make them understand what we're doing. And tell them if they're going to get in here and play games with us, in other words, if they're not going to go along with our scheme here to change this corporation around, then don't play at all, because we don't need 6 or 8 or 10 bunch of patriots in here buying shares and giving their proxies to 6 or 8 different people. If they do that, all we're doing, folks, is masturbating, and it's absolutely non-productive. Maybe a lot of fun. Everybody can say, oh, I'm really participating, but it's not going to amount to anything, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure you understand that. Either participate and go along with what we intend to do so that we'll have the power of a large block of voting stock owned by citizens of this country who are sick and tired of what the news media has been doing to us, and can turn this corporation around and make it work in our best interest, or get the hell out of town and don't interfere with what we're doing. Please. Okay, folks, make sure that you're in a chair, you're comfortable, you got your mind open, you got a pad of paper and a pencil by your side, because we're going to spread some light in some dark corners. Visitors to New York City who venture in to the large building known as the United Nations are amazed to find that there is a meditation room. The meditation room, ladies and gentlemen, is 30 feet long, 18 feet wide at the entrance, which faces north-northeast, and 9 feet wide at the other end. It is, therefore, wedge-shaped. Its only entrance is through 2 tinted glass-paned doors, outside of which stands a United Nations guard. Inside the room is another guard. Once through the doors, the visitor finds himself in a darkened corridor which leads to the left. The sharp transition from a world of light to one of extreme darkness forces a feeling of abrupt withdrawal from the outside world upon the senses of the visitor, who walks along the corridor, reaches the inner arched entrance, turns right, and then looks into the room. The room is very dimly lit. The only source of light at first glance is that which is reflected squarely from the gleaming upper surface of the brooding, somber altar in the center of the room. A special lens recessed in the ceiling focuses a beam of light on the altar from a point above and just beyond its far edge. Thin lines of bluish light lap the edges of the shadow cast by the altar. The acoustical properties of the room are unique. The edges of padding material behind the paneling on the walls can be detected at the ceiling level. This absorbs sound, as does the Swedish woven blue rug which covers the floor of the corridor and the back of the room. The room is as quiet as an underground tomb. Its floor is paved with blue-gray slate slabs laid in a haphazard pattern. At the edge of the rug are 2 very low railings extending out from the east and west walls of the room. The center space between the railings is some 6 feet in width. To the right of the inner entrance are 10 low wicker benches arranged in 2 rows of 3 and 1 back row of 4 against the corridor wall. Attempts by visitors to pass the railings are discouraged by the guard. The mural is a fresco which was painted originally on wet plaster, 1 section at a time, by the artist with the aid of an expert in this work brought from Europe. It is set into a steel-framed narrow panel projected from the wall, behind which is an enclosed area some 6 inches deep, which has its own light source. A small square projector set close against the front base of the altar throws a diffused beam of light from a recessed aperture upon the surface of the mural. There are also 10 hidden lights, 5 on each side of the room, behind the upper edges of a thin suspended ceiling which extends out over the room from the top of the mural. The 18-inch space between the 2 ceilings contains the light control apparatuses. The lower ceiling is wedge-shaped and separated from 3 walls of the inner room by a foot-wide space. Thus the room appears to be much longer than it really is, because of the many converging lines leading into the narrow end, the corners of which are rounded off on either side of the mural. The altar is 4 feet high and rests on 2 narrow cross pieces. It is a dark gray block of crystalline iron ore from a Swedish mine and weighs 6 1/2 tons. The Swedish government presented this block of ore, the largest of its kind ever mined, to the United Nations in early 1957. The chunk rests on a concrete pillar that goes straight down to bedrock. The area and passageway beneath the room are closed to the public. The chunk of ore has been described as a lodestone or magnetite, which is strongly magnetic and which possesses polarity. In northern Sweden are what may be the largest magnetite deposits in the world, believed to have been formed by segregation in the magma. Magma is the term for molten material held in solution under the pressure of the Earth's crust. The fresco mural was described in the United Nations Review of January 1958 as having been designed, quote, to conform with the purity of line and color sought for what Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld has called a room of stillness, unquote. It was painted predominantly in shades of grays and blues, but includes yellow and white patterns and a black half sphere. Light, pure colors intersect to form deeper shades. The New York Times described the fresco as being 8 feet 8 inches in height and 6 feet 8 inches in width, more brightly illuminated at the top than at the bottom. Bo Beskow, an old friend of Dag Hammarskjöld, painted the mural. Quote, Dag had me start sketches on this last summer, unquote, he said. Quote, he wanted me to do the actual work right here in the room, so I have been here since October 6th, 1957, unquote. The mural was seen for the first time, ladies and gentlemen, on November the 11th, 1957. During the period of the remodeling, the guards were on hand during the day to keep out the curious, and at night the room was locked up with a chain and padlock. The artist said of his work, quote, it has no title, and you can make what you wish of it, unquote. He explained that the geometric patterns in the mural repeated the proportions of the room, and those of the focal point of the room, the piece of iron ore. He also said that he intended to give a feeling of space with the picture. The United Nations Review story stated that, quote, he sought to open up the room so that the eye can travel in the distance when it strikes the wall. To give a slight upward movement, he said he designed winding circles in a spiraling diagonal line which might be compared to a vibrating musical chord. As a resting spot for the viewer's eyes, he provided one spot of black amid the light colors, a half circle at which all lines of the fresco and the room converge. In the New Yorker story cited earlier, Beskow was quoted as saying, quote, my fresco contained no intentional symbols, though I've heard people say that the black and pale blue circle in the upper middle section of the panel stands for the cosmos. All that I seriously sought to do was to open up the wall in order to let the eye travel farther, and to open up the mind, provoking meditation, but not directing it, unquote. The mystic P.D. Ouspensky has written that in, quote, real art nothing is accidental, it is mathematics. Everything in it can be calculated. Everything can be known beforehand. The artist knows and understands what he wants to convey, and his work cannot produce one impression on one man and another impression on another, presuming, of course, they are people on one level. At the same time, the same work of art will produce different impressions on people of different levels, and people from lower levels will never receive from it what people of higher levels receive. This is real objective art. An objective work of art affects the emotional and not only the intellectual side of man, unquote. Mr. Besco's picture is described as non-objective, yet its composition admittedly reflects the dimensions of the room and the chunk of iron ore. This, ladies and gentlemen, involves mathematics. He said of his mural, quote, "You can make what you wish of it," unquote, yet he admittedly sought to create a specific subjective effect in the mind of the spectator. Consequently, Mr. Besco's remarks create confusion rather than understanding. The leaflet made available to those who visit the meditation room was written under the direction of Dag Hammarskjöld himself. Its description of the room is deliberately couched in abstruse language. It contains terms which have meaning to the esoterically inclined, but not to the uninitiated, or those called the profane. These terms will be explained, and have in fact been explained, during the Mystery Babylon segments of the Hour of the Time. But for those who may be just beginning to listen to this program, esoteric means that which is hidden and is kept only for the initiated, those who have studied the mysteries. The profane, ladies and gentlemen, is you. I leave myself out because during the process of studying the mysteries, I, with great irony, have become illumined. And if you continue to listen to the Hour of the Time, so shall you. The leaflet reads, quote, "We all have within us a center of stillness surrounded by silence. People of many faiths will meet here, and for that reason none of the symbols to which we are accustomed in our meditation could be used. However, there are simple things which speak to us all with the same language. We have sought for such things, and we believe that we have found them in the shaft of light striking the shimmering surface of solid rock. So in the middle of the room, we see a symbol of how daily the light of the skies gives life to the earth on which we stand, a symbol to many of us of how the light of the Spirit gives life to matter. But the stone in the middle of the room has more to tell us. We may see it as an altar, empty, not because there is no God, not because it is an altar to an unknown God, but because it is dedicated to the God whom man worships under many names and in many forms. The stone in the middle of the room reminds us also of the firm and permanent in a world of movement and change. The block of iron ore has the weight and solidity of the everlasting. It is a reminder of that cornerstone of endurance and faith on which all human endeavor must be based. The material of the stone leads our thoughts to the necessity for choice between destruction and peace. Of iron man has forged his swords, of iron he has also made his plowshares. The shaft of light strikes the stone in a room of utter simplicity. When our eyes travel from these symbols to the front wall, they meet a simple pattern, opening up the room to the harmony, freedom, and balance of space. There is an ancient Chinese saying that the sense of a vessel is not in its shell, but in the void. So it is with this room. It is for those who come here to fill the void with what they find in their center of stillness, unquote. The World Goodwill Bulletin is published by Lucis Press Limited, owned by Lucis Trust, at 88 Edgware Road, Marble Ark, London, W2, England. The New York branch, the Lucis Publishing Company, 11 West 42nd Street, 32nd floor, issues materials on its arcane school, 3-member triangles, and World Service Fund, and publishes the Beacon magazine. This company ladies and gentlemen, was originally established as the Lucifer Publishing Company, but changed its name on November the 11th, 1924, to the less startling one it bears today. A third branch of the Lucis Trust is located at 1 Rue de Verembe 3E, Geneva, Switzerland. Alice A. Bailey, the now deceased high priestess of the occult arcane school, established and headed the trust and its self-identified Society of Illumined Minds. This powerful group has intimate connections with the United Nations. The World Goodwill Bulletin issued a special edition on the United Nations in July 1957, which contained an article entitled, quote, "Lodestone," unquote. We quote from its description of the meditation room. Quote, "The visitor will be totally unprepared for what he will see as he steps in the door for a moment of quiet. Because of the converging walls and the dim light, he will experience a peculiar spatial disorientation, and dimension and perspective will seem difficult to establish. In the center of the room, he will see illuminated by a single point of light from the ceiling, a rectangular mass. The ore piece is many millions of years old. One feels as though one is in a repository for some natural talisman of significant and noble importance, rather than in a chapel in the ordinary sense. Those who are wedded to seeking communion in traditional settings may be somewhat ill at ease here. This is a sudden break with prior experience. One is thrown violently upon his own resources. The room and the concept do not seem indicative of the supplications or the dualistic concept of the mystic in which illumination is sought as a boon granted by deity. Rather, seemingly inherent in the decoration of the room, in the pinpoint of light playing on the ore, is the concept of a personal concentration of forces, creating a focus that illumines the field of attention. The pinpoint of light, the void of space, the illuminated crystalline ore, one feels projected into a setting of cosmological symbolism rather than one of planetary or even solar intent. It is interesting to speculate on what the long-term influence of this new departure will be on current religious thinking. Ensconced here in the highest hall of man, it cannot be inconsiderable. Whatever interpretations one may attribute to the United Nations Meditation Room, it can be said with certainty that the words and the repercussions have only just begun, unquote. Folks, the new departure in religion referred to did not occur by chance. Tremendous pressure was brought to bear on Trygve and Dag Hammarskjöld to install such a room at the United Nations by such organizations as the World Council of Churches. Trygve announced on April 18, 1949, that such a room would be established. The Fifth General Assembly opened with 1 minute of silence as a religious observance. Shortly thereafter, a temporary meditation room was provided at Lake Success, New York. On February 9, 1951, a meditation room was opened for 1 day at the United Nations Secretariat building. Then on October 14, 1952, the opening day of the Seventh General Assembly, a permanent meditation room was made available to the public. Since then, each assembly has opened with 1 minute of silence. In 1955, the meditation room contained a 300-year-old, 800-pound, 37-inch wide upright section of an agba, or mahogany tree, from French Equatorial Africa. It was the idea of Wallace Harrison, director of the International Board of Architects, which planned the United Nations, co-architect and director of Rockefeller Center, and member of the board of directors of the Socialist New School of Social Research in New York City. See Who's Who in America for 1959 for reference. The room contained a philodendron plant on the altar to symbolize some unknown person killed in a war, an olive green rug, 25 russet-colored chairs, and a blue and white United Nations banner set in front of a ceiling-to-floor white drape. On February 16, 1953, a group known as the Friends of the Meditation Room, numbering 1,500 members, presented through its officers a set of guest books to the United Nations, wherein visitors to the room could inscribe their names, addresses, and religious affiliations. Since then, many, many millions have been estimated by the United Nations to have entered the room. Of these visitors, millions have signed these books, each containing 7,000 names. What purpose, ladies and gentlemen, is served by the accumulation of these thousands of names of individuals with their religious affiliations who visit the room and who, by the act of signing their names, indicate that they do not object to the existence of this pagan temple? The Friends are a product of the non-sectarian layman's movement for a Christian world, Incorporated, the international headquarters of which is located at Wainwright House, Milton Point, Rye, New York. Warren R. Austin, a past permanent United States delegate to the United Nations, headed a Friends committee which presented $12,600 to Dag Hammarskjöld on April 24, 1957, as first payment on $25,000 needed to remodel and enlarge the room. The movement has issued United Nations Meditation Room identification cards to 300 men and women who go periodically to this room for prayer. It once issued prayer cards to visitors containing prayers from the, quote, world's great living religions, unquote, namely Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Islamism, Sikhism, Christianity, and St. Francis of Assisi. I was not aware that St. Francis of Assisi was one of the world's great religions. Were you? The Friends held vigils of prayer in the room in 1953 and 1954. Back in 1946, the movement had sent Dr. Frank Laubach, Union Theological Seminary graduate and author of, quote, Letters of a Modern Mystic, unquote, to the Paris Peace Conference to lobby for the establishment of the Meditation Room. Speakers for the movement's meetings have included Norman Cousins, Ralph Bunch, and Frank P. Graham of the United Nations, and William Ernest Hocking and Curtly F. Mather of Harvard, all of whom have Communist Front records. See the May, June, and July-August 1959 and July-August 1962 issues of the Layman's Movement Review. The movement has included among its members Dwight David Eisenhower. The most important friend of the movement from its inception, however, has been John D. Rockefeller, Jr., a Methodist missionary, Wayman C. Huckabee, secured and received grants from John D. Rockefeller, Jr.'s Davison Fund and from his New York City Riverside Church funds for 5 consecutive years, 1937 through 1941, for a health center in Hiroshima, Japan. Huckabee then became the secretary of the movement in New York in 1941 and secured 2 grants a year for the organization from the Davison Fund until it was liquidated. It is not coincidence, ladies and gentlemen, that the funds John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s Davidson Fund and from his New York City Riverside Church funds for the years 1937 to 1941 were for the health center in Hiroshima, Japan, a city which we ultimately dropped an atomic weapon. Rockefeller, ladies and gentlemen, continued his yearly grants without fail from his own personal funds. During the 22 years Huckabee remained with the movement, $1 million was raised for its work. When the movement first sought to secure Wainwright House for its headquarters in 1951, John D. Rockefeller Jr. gave $5,000 of the $25,000 needed. Since 1951, 10,000 individuals have signed the guest book of Wainwright House. 5,000 have attended its public meetings. Its members have been addressed by the President of the National Council of Churches. Its conference rooms have been used by the Episcopal, Presbyterian, Methodist, Baptist, Congregationalist, and Quaker churches. When the Friends of the Meditation Room agreed to raise $15,000 to pay for the redecoration of the room, John D. Rockefeller, Jr. gave $5,000 of the amount sought. Dag Hammarskjöld personally raised another $10,000 from the Marshall Field family for the cost of the fresco in the room. The United Steelworkers, AFL-CIO, gave $500. The movement was formed, ladies and gentlemen, in 1940. The man who started it was Dr. Arthur Compton, the scientist who first brought the identified communist and accused agent espionage Professor J. Robert Oppenheimer into the Atomic Energy Project in 1942. Wainwright House has its own meditation room on its second floor. The room contains the Agba wood altar first used in the UN meditation room and the cherry wood chairs and drapes from that room presented to the Friends by the United Nations in 1957. The house also contains a large library centered around the Thomas Sugru Memorial Library, a $1,600 collection of books on religion and occultism, where one may read up on spiritualism, Zen, Taoism, yoga, Judaism, etc. Every book in the library has a bookplate therein designed by the artist Fritz Eichenberg. His bookplate depicts the ancient cross in the shape of a T surrounded by a serpent symbolizing wisdom and healing and forming the letter S. The T and S, Thomas Sugru's initials, are crowned by the lotus, Vedantic representation of all being. In the background lies the city of Jerusalem, over which shine two stars, the star of the east of Christianity and six-pointed star of Judaism. A flame spreads an arc of light above, proclaiming the continuity of life and the immortality of the soul. M. Oldfield Howey tells us in The Encircled Serpent that in the symbolism of Egypt, the serpent is constantly represented as surmounting a cross. The brazen serpent was a palladium or talisman in the form of a serpent coiled around the mystic Tau or T. The serpent set up by Moses was originally the Egyptian sun god who was now known to his people as Jehovah, unquote. Joseph von Hammer, in the History of the Assassins, explains the Tau as the figure of the Phallus. Quote, among the Egyptians, the lotus was the symbol of Osiris and Isis. It was esteemed a sacred ornament by the priests. The six-pointed star is the great oriental talisman known as the Seal of Solomon. Its meaning, ladies and gentlemen, and the identity of Osiris and Isis has already been explained in past episodes of the Hour of the Time. It will also be explained on a later edition of the Hour of the Time when we discuss the Great Seal of the United States of America. The arc of light on the bookplate is the In Sof from the Kabbalistic writings, or mystical theosophy, which teach that it created the world by virtue of 10 emanations from the Infinite One. The emanations, or Sephiroth, are arranged into a form called the Tree of Life, which in turn is vertically composed of 3 pillars. C.W. King, in his Gnostics, states that the 2 outer pillars figure largely amongst all the secret societies of modern times. And naturally so, for these Illuminati have borrowed without understanding it the phraseology of the Kabbalists. Dag Hammarskjöld calls the altar a reminder of that, quote, cornerstone on which all human endeavor must be based, unquote. The meditation room faces north-northeast. To enter the room, one must proceed from darkness to light. From darkness to light. With these facts in mind, note the Kabbalistic symbolism of the following description of the cornerstone by an authority. Quote, in its situation, it lies between the north, the place of darkness, and the east, the place of light. And hence this position symbolizes progress from darkness to light and from ignorance to knowledge. The permanence and durability of the cornerstone is intended to remind us that long after our death we have within ourselves a sure foundation of eternal life, a cornerstone of immortality and emanation, which pervades all nature and which therefore must survive the tomb, unquote. On a higher level of esoteric knowledge, the metal altar or stone can be likened to the ancient stone of foundation, which according to the same authority cited above was supposed, quote, to have been placed at one time within the foundations of the Temple of Solomon, and afterwards, during the building of the second temple, transported to the Holy of Holies. It was in the form of a perfect cube, or as the Freemasons call it, ashlar, and had inscribed upon its upper face within a delta or triangle the sacred tetragrammaton or ineffable name of God. In a scurrilous book of the Middle Ages, The Life of Jesus, there was another account of the stone. Quote, at that time there was in the temple the ineffable name of God inscribed upon the stone of foundation, unquote. This scandalous book proceeded to state that our Savior, quote, cunningly obtained a knowledge of the tetragrammaton from the stone of foundation, and by its mystical influence was enabled to perform his miracles. There was a very general prevalence among the earliest nations of antiquity of the worship of stones as the representative of deity, and in England the Queen sits upon a throne under which is a stone. This happens in almost every ancient temple, and in every ancient temple there was a legend of a sacred or mystical stone. The mystical stone there has received the name of the, quote, stone of foundation, unquote. And the scribes who had come down from Jerusalem said, quote, he has Beelzebub, and by the prince of devils he casts out devils, unquote. Alfred Edward Waite, in his study of the Zohar, the Kabbalistic textbook of the 14th century, entitled The Secret Doctrine of Is.Ra.El, wrote on page 62 of a, quote, mysterious stone called Shethia, unquote, which was cast by Jehovah into the abyss, so to form the basis of the world and give birth thereto. One might say otherwise, that it was like a cubical stone or altar, for its extremity was concealed in the depth, while its surface or summit rose above the chaos. It was the central point in the immensity of the world, the cornerstone, the tried stone, the sure foundation, but also that stone which the builders rejected, unquote. And where have we heard that before? Well, folks, nowhere else but in the teachings of Freemasonry. But what really, in the Christian meaning, is the cornerstone? Isaiah said, quote, therefore thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will lay a stone in the foundations of Sion, a tried stone, a cornerstone, a precious stone, founded in the foundation. He that believeth, let him not hasten, unquote. The cornerstone is Jesus Christ, quote, the stone which the builders rejected, unquote. One need go no further than the inner entrance of the meditation room to see concrete evidence of the godlessness of the United Nations. That word sticks in my throat, godlessness. The stone, the metal altar, in its stark setting in that room, is in itself a symbol of idolatry. Quote, stone worship was perhaps the earliest form of fetishism. Eusebius cites Porphyry as saying that the ancients represented the deity by a black stone, because his nature is obscure and inscrutable. The reader here will be reminded of the black stone, Hajar el-Aswad, placed in the southwest corner of the Kaaba at Mecca, which is worshipped by the ancient Arabians. The Druids, it is well known, had no other images of their gods but cubical, or sometimes columnar stones. To use the language of Dudley, the pillar, or stone, was adapted as a symbol of strength and firmness, a symbol also of the divine power, and by a ready inference a symbol or idol of the deity himself. The god Hermes, or Mercury, was represented without hands or feet, being a cubical stone, because the cubical figure betokened his solidity and stability, unquote. Hammarskjöld, in the speech quoted earlier, said, quote, in this case, we wanted this massive altar to give the impression of something more than temporary. We had another idea. We thought we could bless by our thoughts the very material out of which arms are made. The description of the altar as a natural talisman by the World Goodwill Group also is significant. Talisman is a term which means a stone or other object engraven with figures or characters to which is attributed the occult powers of the planetary influences and celestial configurations under which it was made. Altars among the ancients were generally made of turf or stone, usually in a cubical form. Altars were erected long before temples. The shaft of light upon the altar in the meditation room casts a shadow to the north. The use of the north as a symbol of darkness, a portion of the old sun worship, of which we find so many relics in Gnosticism, in Hermetic philosophy, in Freemasonry, in the temples of all of the secret societies which exist in a membership in the shape of a pyramid, with a whole bunch of slathering idiots thirsting after the secrets which they will never know, and a few at the top who really understand that the only secret is how to control those on the bottom. The east was the place of the sun's daily birth, and hence highly revered. The north, the place of his annual death. Finally, it must be emphasized above all that the altar in the meditation room is unsanctified and unhallowed. It has no sacred meaning, can inspire no reverence, and is not inviolable. This altar cannot be used for sacrifice in any other than an unholy sense. Ladies and gentlemen, one clue to the mural's symbolism is given in Hammarskjöld's and Beskows' description of its purpose. It was to open up the wall, to give a feeling of space, of the void, in effect to extend the room further out into another dimension, as it were. The Friends leaflet, a call to prayer, states the theme of the mural is, quote, infinity, unquote. Now let us look at this mural squarely from the viewpoint of the esoterically inclined, the occultist, the adept, the initiate. There is an asymmetrical arrangement of the entire mural into what is called a magic square, which is a square arranged in an equal number of cells, in this case 9, 3 rows up and 3 rows down. The game tic-tac-toe is based on this type of square. The talismanic magic square has a series of numbers in the cells, the enumeration of all of whose columns, vertically, horizontally, and diagonally, will give the same sum. The following 9 digits, so arranged as to add up to 15 in any direction, were regarded as sacred because 15 is the numerical value of the Hebrew word for God, Yah, spelled J-A-H, which is one of the forms of the Tetragrammaton. And in the rows, going across from left to right in each row, the first row, the numbers are 4, 9, and 2. In the second row, the numbers are 3, 5, and 7. And in the third row, the numbers are 8, 1, and 6. Whether you add them up diagonally, vertically, or horizontally, no matter in which direction you go, it always adds up to the number 15. The predominantly dark blue rectangle, which occupies most of the middle tier of the mural, the upper side of which passes through the exact middle of the small bisected sphere, represents the altar. The yellow rectangle, set at an angle into the lower and middle tiers so that one corner touches the bottom of the mural, is a second representation of the altar. They indicate, ladies and gentlemen, duality. Remember the yin and the yang, positive, negative, male, female, the androgynous God, the yellow figure, light, the sun, the blue figure, earth, the altar. Both rectangular figures are overlaid in part by other patterns in other colors. The all-important sphere in the left upper middle section symbolizes, among other things, the sun. Sun worship was the oldest and by far the most prevalent of all the ancient religions. The sphere is bisected and quartered, the phenomena of nature that made the deepest religious impression on archaic man were the outstretched heavens above him and the outspread earth beneath, both of which he naturally divided into 4 quarters. This fourfold heaven and earth he signified by a circle, or a square divided crossways. The circle, ladies and gentlemen, is met with in every form of sorcery. The circle in quadrants is called the magic circle. The objects in the meditation room are intended to be evocative in the religious sense. Of what? Well, the mural and altar are admittedly symbols. By symbolism, the simplest, the commonest objects are transformed or idealized and acquire a new, and so to say, an illimitable value. An expert on these subjects has written, quote, "Under occult dominion art, music and politics all tend to the same end, confusion, a calculated and inducted confusion. Chaos, for minds that are confused will obey and bow to the hidden masters, and out of chaos comes order." And isn't that the motto of the 33rd degree of Freemasonry? Ordo ab chao. Quote, "The rule of the triangle and the ellipse, together with a crude geometry in modern art, is the rule in aesthetics. Standing before a meaningless cubist canvas at an art exhibition, one day a puzzled amateur asked, quote, 'But what does it mean?' Unquote, to which the painter replied, 'It's not a question of what it means, it's a question of what is its effect on the observer.' Consciously or unconsciously, the artist spoke the truth. Psychiatrists tell us that this school of insidious humbug is simply an elaboration of the policy of the interruption of ideas, leading to total incoherence and madness. Cubist art is an effort to produce certain psychic effects obtainable by optical illusion. Beauty has nothing to do with it. The Cubist school is not the realm of art at all. It belongs to that of medicine and psychic science. Those who forget that this devastating fad of the interrupted idea can be extended to music, literature, and every other phase of human effort do so at their own peril. For instance, listen closely to the beat of the rap musician. Quote, "A mind that is positive cannot be controlled. For the purpose of occult dominion, minds must therefore be rendered passive and negative in order that control can be conceived. Minds consciously working to a definite end are a power, and power can oppose power for good or for evil. The scheme for world dominion might be doomed by the recognition of this principle alone, but as it is unfortunately unrecognized, it remains unchallenged," unquote, until we decided to purchase a media corporation, and thus now we have minds consciously working to a definite end, and we are now a power, a very great power. A striking feature of the mural is the white half crescent in its upper right quadrant. The inner curve of the crescent closest to the bisected black, pale blue, and yellow sphere is equidistant at all points from the exact center of the bisected figure. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, if the curve of the crescent is continued full circle, the figure which results is a hidden point within a circle, the symbol which was adopted by the astronomers as their sign of the sun, and of course you know that the crescent is the sign of the moon, Isis and Osiris. In the ancient mysteries, the point in the circle denoted the principle of fecundity and has been carried down through the ages as a sign of various secret societies, including the Illuminati of Adam Weishaupt in 1776, and you will find the dot in a circle in the temples of Freemasonry. It is the symbol of the phallus. We always come back to the generative force. The female principle is also emphasized in the crescent moon, or lunette figure of Isis. There are 72 geometrical figures and shadings in the mural. The 2 crescent shapes and the 4 long triangles, white, yellow, blue, and black, which are located in the 2 upper tiers of the mural, are each counted as one figure. The number 72 denoted from the earliest days the divine name of 72 words. 72 words. This number is derived from a permutation of the values assigned to the 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton, or JHVH, Jehovah, the ineffable, unpronounceable name of God. This name, in its multitude of forms, can be used to work miracles or magic, so say the Kabbalists. It was derived from Exodus chapter 14, verses 19, 20, and 21, which each consist of 72 letters. Now, if these three verses be written at length, one above another, the first from right to left, the second from left to right, and the third from right to left, or as the Greeks would say, boustrophedon, they will give 72 columns of 3 letters each. Then each column will be a word of 3 letters, and as there are 72 columns, there will be 72 words of 3 letters, each of which will be the 72 names of the deity alluded to in the text. And these are called the Shem Ham Pharesh. 72 is also the number of the quinaries, or sets of 5 degrees in the 360 degrees of the zodiac. The number of triangles in the mural are difficult to count. There are 22 isosceles, equilateral, scalene, right-angled triangles. There are also 22 numbered letters in the ancient Hebrew alphabet with values of 1 to 400. The triangle is an ancient emblem of the deity. It is also a sign of the female element. However, if the apex of the triangle is pointed down, it becomes the male element. Thus, inverted, it may also represent Lucifer, particularly if it is black in color. The sphere figure, or the spiral figure, intertwined with the mural-length diagonal line, symbolizes the caduceus of Hermes, or Mercury, which mythologically is represented as 2 serpents twined around the winged wand of Mercury. 9 arcs are formed by the intersections of the spiral line with the diagonal. The 9th Hebrew letter, Teth, with the value of 9, has the signification of serpent. The number of the beast of Revelation is 666, which Kabbalistically is 9, the number of generation. The twin serpents of the caduceus are negative and positive, representing polarity, and twine around the spinal column. They are the kundalini, or sex force. In the encircled serpent, the chapter on the caduceus contains references on page 72 to the ancient use of the symbol without wings as seen in the mural. The caduceus is also the symbol of peace, the propaganda term associated with the United Nations. The serpents are male and female, the sun god and the moon god, and are symbols of generation, or the phallus. Buddha was symbolized by the serpent, and in mythology is identical with Mercury. The center sphere and the outer circles around it form the all-seeing eye. This bisected sphere overlays an isosceles triangle bounded on one side by the diagonal line. According to Manly Palmer Hall in his occult treatise on the secret destiny of America, the all-seeing eye is that of the great architect of the universe, whenever it appears as a symbol of God. His explanation is that which is generally accepted. It is, however, erroneous. A full commentary on the meaning of this all-important symbol has already been dealt with in previous episodes of the Hour of the Time. The mural, if viewed from the top or the roof overhead of the meditation room, is the truncated top of a pyramid. Behind the mural is a smaller pyramid, which is that which contains the eye, the all-seeing eye of Lucifer. Good night, and God bless each and every single one of you.
I'm standing out in front of the walls of Jerusalem, a city historically known for hostility towards Jesus. In Matthew 23, Jesus says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing." So I'm a Jewish man that believes in Jesus. Let's go see what the people of Jerusalem have to say about it. Okay, so I'm a Jewish man, and I believe in Jesus. Am I wrong?
You are, yes.
Yes? No, tell me. I'm not going to be offended. I just want to know why and have an intellectual conversation. Okay, I'm a Jewish man.
Okay.
I believe in Jesus.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Tell me how.
It makes absolutely zero sense. Because you're Jewish, you should learn about your own roots first.
Can I hear what the Yeshua was?
What's that?
That story?
What's that?
You said you had a Yeshua 5 years ago.
Yeah, salvation story.
Can I hear more about the story?
More about the story? Of course. So 5 years ago, I had an encounter with Jesus that I wasn't expecting.
Okay.
I wasn't expecting it. I was miserable, depressed, anxious, and suicidal. And I felt empty. So I tried to fill it up with New Age spirituality, meditation, bits and pieces of Buddhism and Hinduism, idol worship. I had my own made-up religion. And I realized that I needed something more. And when I finally crumbled and fell to the floor, I cried out to God, and Jesus showed up. He showed up in people, he showed up in books, he showed up in television programs, and I started to weep. And so what I realized was that this is the truth. And so I put my faith in Yeshua. I was changed overnight. And I decided to research the scriptures, the Old Testament, and, well, the Tanakh, our Hebrew scriptures, and realized that they were pointing to someone. The whole time they were pointing to someone. And then when I read the New Testament, I was like bold enough to finally open it and read through it. I realized there's a beautiful story from beginning to end about the problem that the Jewish people have with their relationship with God, and in the New Testament how God fixed the problem by sending the Mashiach. Yeah. So 5 years studying my faith, realizing that this is the truth. And so it was just a simple question of, am I wrong? And if I'm wrong, just your opinion as to why, and that's all. Just to have just a dialogue between Jewish brothers.
Very good argument.
And I appreciate you stopping by. I mean,
yeah.
it takes courage.
No, I like having a good time. So
yeah,
this is part of my good time today.
Like, why would I be wrong? And first of all, I appreciate you stopping because.
Is it possible to have reached for two different, things, different conclusions to have been made by different people, I guess?
Absolutely.
You and someone else?
Yeah, like most traditional Jews would say that I'm wrong.
Right.
Yeah, and that it's not appropriate, it's not right for a Jewish person to put their faith in Yeshua. Only God alone. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Okay, right? It's the Shema. God is one, he's not a man, like it says in Hosea. But when we you're familiar with the story of Genesis, right? The Bereshit, where God appears to Abraham as a human. He's with two angels. He appears as a human, and speaks to Abraham in first person. In first person, as God.
I don't know.
That's okay. That's okay.
Necessarily.
And so he has appeared. He has appeared as in human form in the past. So he can do it without being only human.
Right. So you're right. If you right, I guess I see how if you see that main Malach who speaks to Avram in first person, which Rashi whatever.
Rashi.
That there's a main officer and there's two other angels.
Yeah.
So I guess where I'm coming from. I guess where I'm coming from under the understanding or idea that those are all three were angels, and I wasn't necessarily I believe in angels and God's messengers, and without seeing that was God, I can't agree to the point that I wouldn't be able to agree to the point that God is that there's precedent.
Because there are times in the Tanakh where he actually speaks in first person as the Lord, like he speaks in first person. But you should check it out.
How could I believe that you're wrong? We have belief. Truth is truth.
Right.
Right. So I've always been a fan of looking for truth with truth.
Okay.
That means one can look for truth in a way that's self-serving, that works, I like this.
Right.
What I believe is that everyone has a journey in life. And the only way to search for that journey is to search for it with truth. That means look for truth with truth.
Right.
What's in the way always?
Yeah.
We have our biases. And we're human beings, we have a bias.
Right. Did you know that I grew up and my bias was against Jesus?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, but I came to faith in him through a supernatural experience.
I totally understand that.
Yeah.
I expect that. I have a lot of experience with people like that.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell you something. We need to go to a direction that takes us to inner tranquility, to a place where we can actually find the truth.
So that's really interesting because Jesus himself actually said that he is the truth. So I believe that actually if someone is seeking truth, and if they seek with their heart and they seek long enough, that they will find it in Jesus. Hey guys, do you speak English? Can I ask you a question for YouTube? Yes?
Yeah, I'm cool.
Okay, so I'm a Jewish man.
Yeah.
Okay, I believe in Jesus. And am I wrong? And if I am, how or why?
God created the world, and you can tell that He did, because if you look around, you'll see.
It's beautiful.
And really look around. If you really look around, you'll see.
Thank you. We're asking people questions on the street about my faith and your opinion about my faith. And I don't take it personal. We're just asking people's opinions. I'm a Jewish guy. I'm a Jewish guy. But it is about Jesus. So I'm a Jewish man that believes in Jesus, and I'm just asking people what they think about that and if they think that I'm wrong.
What's the name of
the channel? So Be It.
So Be It?
So Be It. Amen de Anglit.
Yeah?
Yeah. So just asking people's opinions, that's all. Like what's your opinion? You see a Jewish man standing in front of you. I say I believe in Jesus. How does that make you feel, and do you think that I'm wrong?
I mean, I have my opinion, and you have your...
And your opinion is valid and completely respectable.
As well.
Thank you.
If you ask me, like, if we would have a debate, I wouldn't know much.
Yeah.
But if you would have a debate with a rabbi, a rabbi that knows, I think great fun.
But you can tell me what you think, which is important. I grew up Jewish.
Yeah.
I have a Jewish family. I went to Hebrew school.
From New York.
From California.
Right.
Yeah, Hebrew school. And I rocked tefillin. I went to a Jewish summer camp.
And what happened?
No, listen, this was a long time ago. I had my bar mitzvah. My son had his bar mitzvah. But 5 years ago, I had an encounter with Jesus, Yeshua, that I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting it. I was miserable, depressed, anxious, and suicidal. Like I wanted to commit suicide. And I had experiences that were related to Jesus suddenly over the course of like 45 days. Day after day after day. And it started to like change me from the inside, and I didn't know why. So what did they teach you about Yeshua?
I'll tell you what. I studied in a Goyish school.
Okay.
So
Gentile school.
What? Yeah, Gentile school.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
It's great.
It's good that you
can translate.
Yeah, can translate that. So yeah, and I did study a little bit on that, on Christianity.
Yeah. People think that the New Testament is like anti-Semitic and things, but you studied a little bit of Christianity, right?
And of course, I don't know if it's anti-Semitic, either yes or no, but I think you can see in the revolutions after what happened afterwards. Can be a little bit anti-Semitic.
Yeah, well, actually, afterwards, the church moved away from the Bible.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And from their Jewish roots.
Yeah, of course.
They disconnected from their Jewish roots, which caused connections with politics and then oppression and persecution of Jewish people.
Yeah.
You know. So what happened was, 5 years ago, I had this experience. And I didn't want to just think that, I feel it, therefore it's true. I wanted to study it. So I read through the whole Bible. The Tanakh, all the way through to the Brit Chadashah, the New Testament, and I realized there's a beautiful story from beginning to end about the problem that the Jewish people have with their relationship with God, and in the New Testament how God fixed the problem by sending the Mashiach, who was supposed to come before the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and he came right on time. And so I thought, this is incredible. He changed my life, and now I'm reading about it, how he did it.
And you feel attached to it.
Yeah, I feel that it's the truth.
It's your own point of view, you know.
It doesn't make it true, though.
I can't tell you, what you think, what you feel is wrong, you know. It's like.
Well, I mean, like, I could say that the sky is green and the moon is made out of cheese, but it's not true.
A religion is something you need a teacher and mentor to provide you, explain to you between the lines.
Yeah.
You can't read from words. So I would tell you that it's actually quite silly without exploring in a very detailed way your own roots. With a rabbi, somebody who's knowledgeable, and can explain to you, I would say it's an unfortunate thing to do.
I appreciate your opinion. Have you ever read the New Testament before?
I did. I don't need to because I have my own religion. I'm 1,000% set. So there's no reason to. I love what I do.
Yeah.
And I'm very passionate. But you're Jewish.
Yeah.
You see, are you Jewish?
Yeah.
If someone's not Jewish, by the way, I wouldn't tell him. You know, it's not my thing.
Yeah.
But for a Jewish person, you certainly should read your own roots. Otherwise. It actually makes absolutely zero sense because you're Jewish. You should learn about your own roots first.
What do you like? What's your faith? What do you believe?
What I believe? I mean, I believe what I grew up learning, which was just like I don't know, it's like the Shem creator of all. Like more so, just grew up believing in Jewish law, like following halakha.
Right.
Going on tefillin.
Right.
And then when I came to never really did a lot of like digging as far as like why or like how we were created. Just more so like kind of had that faith just from inheriting it from my parents. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'm a Jewish believer in Jesus.
אתה רואה גויים כשווים, כבני אדם.
כן, בוודאי.
אוקיי, כל הזכויות שיש לך, כאילו, מגיע להם.
אני רואה את עצמי כמיוחד יותר, אבל ודאי שווה זכויות.
אוקיי, מה זה אומר מיוחד יותר? באיזה מובן? מישהו שלא מבין.
במובן הדתי.
אוקיי, שזה נותן לך מה?
אני חושב שיש לי ייעוד גדול יותר. הייעוד שלי הוא חשוב יותר.
אוקיי. Do you see Jews and non-Jews as the same?
Are you Jewish?
Yeah.
Are they Jewish?
No.
So what's the purpose of the question?
People outside want to know, from a Haredi point of view, do you see Jews and non-Jews as the same?
I'll answer you politically. In the eyes of Hashem...
I don't want political. Yeah, okay, fine,
in the eyes of Hashem, we all are created. In the eyes of God. We are all created, but as you know, as the Chumash, the Bible says, the Jews are the chosen nation. So you can't exactly consider that when there's testimony from Hashem that we are different. So it's not my opinion, it's Hashem's opinion. I just happen to follow Hashem.
האם גויים, אנשים לא יהודים, הם פחות או inferior, כאילו, to Jews, ליהודים?
הם נחותים.
נחותים, כן.
בשום אופן לא. אין שום קשר. אין שום קשר יהודי וגוי לגבי רמת משכל או רמת מוסריות, זה רק עניין של מסורות. ליהודים יש מסורת מסוימת, לגויים יש מסורת אחרת. הם יכולים להיות כאן וכאן, להתחלף. שום קשר.
האם אתה רואה גויים כשווים, כאילו בזכויות, כבני אדם?
אני רואה אותם כאן כיצירה של הקדוש ברוך הוא, זה לא משנה. מבחינת אדם הם אדם. שהתנהגו כמו בן אדם, אז הם שווים כאדם.
למה אתה חושב שהם לא מתנהגים כמו?
לא אמרתי שהם לא, אמרתי אם הם לא מתנהגים.
לא, אבל למה זה עלה לך לראש?
כי גם אני, לא רק גויים, גם יהודי שלא מתנהג כיהודי, הוא לא נחשב, התורה אומרת להרוג אותו גם, אם צריך.
להרוג אותו?
כן.
אוקיי.
בטח, יש הלכות, מה, לפי התורה אני אומר, לא... ולכן אני אומר, מי שמתנהג כבן אדם, ויש לו את הזכות להיות בן אדם, אז יש לו זכויות של אדם. מי שמתנהג כחד ושלום לא כאדם, אין לו דינים של אדם.
האם אתה רואה אנשים יהודים ולא יהודים כאותו דבר, כאותו דבר?
אני יודע שיש כל מיני תפיסות, שיש איזשהו הבדל בין יהודים ללא יהודים. אני, מבחינת ההשקפה שלי, אני לא מבין בזה כלום. זה משהו שאני לא חושב שאף אחד מבין בזה, באמת. והרבה אנשים לוקחים את זה לכל מיני כיוונים לא נכונים. אני יודע שאלוקים רוצה שאנחנו כולנו נהיה באהבה אחד עם השני ובכבוד אחד לשני.
אם אתה בחול ואתה פוגש מישהו שהוא לא יהודי, אתה רואה אותו כאילו שווה?
כן, גם אני עובד עם אנשים שהם לא יהודים, בעבודה שלי. אני איך שאני חווה את זה, אני משתדל כלפי כל בן אדם להיות באהבה ובכבוד כלפיו.
אוקיי. תתי, אני אשאל אותך, האם אתה רואה יהודים וגויים כשווים, כאילו?
כשווים?
כן. בזכויות, כאילו מגיע להם, דברים כאלה.
מגיע? כן. פשוט ליהודים יש דרך חיים שבורא עולם נתן לנו. הגויים אין לזה, הם פספסו.
לא, אבל נגיד זכות הצבעה, או לגור איפה שרוצים, כאילו... מישהו שהוא...
לא, זה מדינה יהודית. אני לא חושב שלערבים... מדינה יהודית, למה הם מצביעים? מדינה שלנו.
אבל הם מצביעים. יש להם זכות להצביע, כי הם מצרכים.
אני חושב שזה מדינה שלנו, זה שיש עכשיו 13 מנדטים לערבים, למשל. אתה רוצה שיהיה שר ביטחון ערבי, או יכולים למסור שטחים לערבים? זה לא מתאים. מדינה יהודית, זה מדינה שלנו.
האם אתה מבדיל בין יהודים ולא יהודים? כאילו בקטע, אתה חושב שהם שווים?
האם אני חושב שהם שווים או מה דעתי?
דעתך, האם הם שווים?
לדעתי שעדיין הם לא שווים.
שמה?
שעדיין אין שוויון.
לא, זה בסדר. האם אתה רואה, נגיד שיש לך שכן שהוא יהודי, ושכן בצד השני שהוא לא יהודי. חוץ אתה אוהב אחד ולא אוהב, זה לא משנה. אתה רואה אותם כאותו דבר?
כן.
שווים כאילו.
כן.
האם אתם רואים יהודים ולא יהודים, גויים, כשווים?
אין לי שום הבדל.
אין שום הבדל, מבחינתך.
עד שהוא לא עושה לי רע, אני לא...
למה שהוא יעשה לך רע?
דוגמה, ערבים, אתמול היה פיגוע.
לא, אבל נגיד, מישהו פה, שוודיה, אין לו משהו נגד...
אני אתן כסף לגוי שנזקק או משהו, אוסף כסף, אין שום בעיה, אני מאוד אוהב.
יש לך דעה אחרת?
קצת שונה, אני כן חושב שיהודי הוא קצת יותר... כאילו, ודאי שיהיה לי עדיפות גדולה הרבה יותר לעזור ליהודי מאשר לגוי.
למה?
למה? כי יהודי הוא אח שלי.
אוקיי. נגיד מצב שיש שני אנשים ברחוב שצריכים כסף, אתה נותן לשניהם או רק ליהודי?
ניתן לשניהם. אבל ליהודי בחיבה יותר.
אתה סתם אומר את זה?
לא, אני אתן לשניהם בשביל... דבר ראשון כי אני בן אדם. דבר שני כי לא ליצור שנאה.
Okay. Do you see Jews and non-Jews as the same? כאילו שווה ערך.
No.
Okay, explain.
I see Jews as the chosen nation.
Okay.
They were chosen by Hashem.
Does that make Jews better?
Makes Jews different.
Okay.
Like not all of our body parts are the same. They're all the same parts of the body, but there's the mind, there's the heart, there's the foot. They're not all the same. They're all part of the same body.
Do they deserve the same rights? Let's put it that way. Jews, non-Jews, anyone who lives here, let's say, does everyone deserve the same? You treated the same. Let's put it that way.
I think not. I think that this is the nation of the Jews, that the Jews should have more rights than the non-Jews.
Like, give me an example of a right that a Jew should have that a non-Jew shouldn't.
Right now, there's the right for Jews to come to Israel and to get your citizenship, which isn't for all non-Jews. This is the land for the Jews. All the Jews can come and live here. I think that Jews should have more rights than non-Jews.
Can you give another example? Maybe even a law that doesn't exist, or a right that should exist.
I think that the Jews should get land here, like the Bible says that each Jew, when Yeshua came with the Jews to Israel, each one got his own plot of land. So I think that each Jew should get his own plot of land, and non-Jews shouldn't.
What about the ones who are already here?
There's a halachic issue of having non-Jews in Israel. There's what's called the Ger Toshav, someone who if he keeps the 7 laws of Bnei Noach,
the Noahide laws,
then he could live in Israel.
This is Movie Turn. Leslie Mitchell reporting. And Israel shall be a proverb among all peoples. Across the deserts of Sinai, a biblical prophecy comes to pass as the forces of Israel sweep on in an astonishing triumph of strategy. Inspired by Defense Minister Dayan, she took just over 50 hours to achieve her 2 main objectives: to reach the Gulf of Aqaba and lift the blockade, and leave the Egyptians shoeless in Gaza. However impartial one tries to be, one can only admire the efficiency of this extraordinary advance westwards, as well as the sword thrust to the east into Jordan. The secret of the whole operation was air supremacy. Israel claims to have destroyed the bulk of the Arab air forces in the air and on the ground in less than 3 hours. The might of Egypt's Russian-equipped army appears to have been completely shattered. Israel's victory was won by herself, alone and unaided. We can only pray that Israel will combine victory with discretion, and that she and the Arab nations will find some permanent solution to the bitterness that provoked it.
Good evening. You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Once again, folks, make sure that you have pen and paper by your side, because once again we're going to talk about something that you need to know, and something that also some people are going to find extremely controversial. Be that as it may, we're still going to talk about it. I'm tired. We took the dogs up on top of the mountain today to run and play in the deep snow, and got stuck twice, and that's with a four-wheel drive vehicle. It was a lot of fun, and I worked my tail off getting out of there. So I'm a little bit sore and very tired. So I hope they'll take that into consideration if I make some mistakes tonight. We're going to be discussing British Israelism, known in this country as Christian identity. It is a racist doctrine that proclaims a master race, descended from the house of David, actually farther back than that. They claim that they are the descendants of Seth, and that everybody else in the world are the descendants of Cain. And if you ain't one of them, you ain't nothing. You ain't nobody, and they don't want you around. Simple as that. They're racist in everything that they do and say, although if you ask them about it, they will tell you that they are racialist. And that they really don't have any objections to other races, they just don't want to live with them. And I'm here to tell you that's the biggest bunch of BS you ever heard in your life. If these people ever came to a position of real power, by real power I mean control, they would destroy anyone who doesn't believe as they believe, who doesn't look like they look, and isn't of their race. Now, I'm not just whistling Dixie here, folks. I've studied these people for a long time. I didn't even really know they existed until I started doing my radio broadcast. And all of a sudden I started getting pamphlets and books and letters of congratulations from these people who all thought for some reason that because I opposed the tyranny of those who would destroy this country, that I was somehow one of them. And when they found out that I was not, that I was part Native American, and that I was married to a Chinese woman, I got baskets full and bushels full and big boxes full of the most vicious, vile, despicable, uncouth hate mail that I ever imagined anyone could ever get in their entire life, or that ever existed. I just simply did not know that this type of thing was going on. And they even attacked my wife and children for no reason at all other than they are who they are. And so I thought, gee, I better find out who these people are really quick, because they're dangerous. They want to destroy my children simply because they're not pure Aryan. Now that made me very angry, and makes a lot of other people angry also. They claim that they are the true Israelites. Now this is the strangest claim I've ever heard in my life, ladies and gentlemen, because I've never met one of these people who speaks Hebrew, who actually celebrates the actual Hebrew holidays that the Israelites practiced. They can't read Hebrew. And they mistranslate all the time. Of course, they mistranslate in their favor. But nevertheless, they mistranslate all the time. They'll take somebody else's translation and twist the meaning to mean what they want it to mean because they don't really understand the original Hebrew. They are descendants of Northern Europeans. Now, this is really easy to research, folks. Anybody can do it. You can go back and research the records of the Roman Empire when they went into Northern Europe, when they met the Celts and the Picts and the Gauls and the Teutonic tribes of Germany. These were not Hebrews, ladies and gentlemen. They were not the descendants of Hebrews at all. These were wild men. And I mean wild in every sense of the word. They went into battle stark naked, covered with clay. The Picts were famous for that. I could go on and on and on. They were steeped in nature worship. None of the original religious aspect of the Hebrews came into play with any of these tribes whatsoever. Another strange claim by these people, the British Israelites, is that they are the original progenitors, so to speak, the creators of civilization. Yet in the Middle East, in Africa, and in Asia, there were great civilizations that existed long before these people ever even learned to put a loincloth on, much less become civilized. Their answer to that is that they descended from those Eastern and Middle Eastern civilizations and that they arrived in Northern Europe by some great circuitous route of migration. That doesn't wash either, ladies and gentlemen. If you study these people, you'll find that they most probably came, and I'm talking about the Northern Europeans, they most probably, according to scientists, but you can't really trust them either. You see, they say the American Indians came to North America across a land bridge from Siberia, and they're really Mongols who changed over a period of time and became North American Indians. What we call Indians, they're not Indians at all. They're just North Americans. But the American Indians say that that's not true. They have their own history, and they dispute that. And modern science has a way of changing its story through the years anyway. But they say that the Northern Europeans actually migrated from India. Now, I've been to India several times in my life, ladies and gentlemen, and I haven't seen anybody in the country of India, even in the highest caste groups, that resemble Northern Europeans. Sorry, but there just isn't anybody there who has that kind of resemblance. The ancient Hebrews did not look like Northern Europeans either. Another claim made by these people is that Adam, the father of the human race, and I can't understand why they make this sort of distinction, because Adam was the father of Seth and Cain. But they claim Cain was not produced by a union between Adam and Eve, but by a union between Eve and Satan. And they claim that Cain was the offspring of that union between Eve and Satan. It's all baloney, folks. It's the biggest crock of baloney that anybody's ever spouted ever in history. One of their explanations of this is that the true son of Adam was white, and that Adam actually means blood in the cheeks. When you research that word, you'll find that that's not what it means at all. They claim that Cain was actually a dark-skinned child born of the union between Eve and Satan. You know, there is this really gets wild, folks. It really does. And when you research this name of Adam, you find that it means no such thing. It does not mean blood in the cheeks. And it comes from a long line of myths that existed long before the Bible was ever written, or the Jews became a nation, or the Hebrews became a nation known as Israel. And I'm just going to read to you a couple of short paragraphs from the Holy Grail by Malcolm Godwin, who himself is a British Israelite, but he tells the truth. And so that's what we're interested in on this broadcast. He says, and I quote, "So far we have examined the historical bloodlines, but the blood which courses through the veins of the Grail myth carries with it the hint of something far more dangerous and powerful, like some dark magical ingredient which runs far deeper in ancient tunnels of the collective unconscious. We briefly glimpse the dark spring tides under the moon and the quickening of life. At the time when the Grail legends first appeared, it was generally accepted that the blood women spilled at the moon was responsible for new birth. They didn't know the biological functioning of the sexual organs or the process of the creation of a fetus in the womb. They had no idea at that time. So they believed that the blood women spilled at the moon, or their menstrual period, was responsible for new birth. Here's what he says about that. Blood which was retained in the womb was believed to coagulate into a child. Even Aristotle claimed that human life is a coagulum of menstrual blood, while the Roman Pliny, author of the Encyclopedic Natural History, insisted that it formed the material substance of generation. This curious notion was still taught in European medical schools only 200 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. Far earlier, the ancient Mesopotamian goddess Ninhursag was said to have created humankind out of clay mixed with her, quote, blood of life, end quote. The Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians borrowed this and similar creation myths to form their own. Now listen to this carefully. Remember, this person is a British Israelite. And he says, quote, even the name Adam can be traced to the feminine Adama, A-D-A-M-A-H, meaning bloody clay. So there you have it. And when you trace it back yourself, you'll find the same thing. It does not mean blood in the cheeks. Never did mean blood in the cheeks. Cannot mean blood in the cheeks. Now I'm going to give you the research of the Executive Intelligence Review, and this report is dated November 14, 1997. This is one of the best research organizations in the world, as far as I'm concerned. I don't particularly subscribe to their politics, but I do have great respect for their research, because I've duplicated it in almost every instance. I don't research everything they research, and they don't research everything that I have researched. But when we both research the same thing, the results are identical, which means these people are looking for the truth as I am, and they're not trying to put something in there that's not there. They tell it like it is. And so tonight, I'm going to tell it like it is. So take note of this. Make notes. Remember, listen to everyone, read everything, believe absolutely nothing unless you can prove it in your own research. Here we go. British Israelites and Empire. One of the most glaring examples of British intelligence-sponsored psychological warfare against the United States is the bizarre ideology called variously British Israelism or Christian identity. Victims of this foreign-sponsored ideological virus can be found to hold key positions in the Patriot movement and other movements which may be committed to the destruction of the American Republic. Not all patriots are Christian identity or British Israelism. And I can assure you that British Israelism and Christian identity people who call themselves patriots are not. They have no interest in restoring the Constitution for the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen. They want to split this country, and they want the Northwest the 4 states in the northwest corner of the United States as their own nation. So all of these people running around calling themselves patriots, who also believe in Christian identity or British Israelism, are liars. They are lying to all of us. They have been linked, ladies and gentlemen, to the terrorist bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City in 1995. There are many links to that bombing at a city in eastern Oklahoma called Elohim City, which is a Christian identity British Israelist community. And more broadly, a significant portion of what today claims to be Christianity in American society is consciously or unconsciously based on religious belief structures designed by the British colonial office to undermine Christianity in general and the American Republican form of government in specific. British Israelism is a syncretic organization which in its simplest variant claims that the Anglo-Saxon Celtic race is the true 10 lost tribes of Israel, that the British sovereign is descended from King David, and that as such, an all-encompassing British Empire is biblically prophesied to rule the world in the few final days before Jesus Christ touches down on the Mount of Olives and ends human history. That's what they all want you to believe. None of it is true. They are not descended from King David. They are not Hebrews. They are not the 10 lost tribes of Israel. The tribes of Israel, folks, were never lost in the first place, in case you didn't know that. None of them were ever lost. The Bible does not say that they got lost. There are many variations on this theme. Some versions say that the horrors described in the book of Revelations have begun, and others believe that the tribulations are yet to come. Almost all, even the militant anti-Semites, looked to the Mideast, to Jerusalem, and yearned for the final rebuilding of Solomon's temple, which will be the incontrovertible sign that the end of the world is nigh. These people are also rabid Zionists, ladies and gentlemen. The roots of British Israelism are obscure, but some trace it to the late Elizabethan period in England, a time which coincided with the consolidation of the Church of England and the beginnings of Britain's maritime empire, as well as the creation of a full-time secret intelligence service. It's also the time, ladies and gentlemen, when the Royal House of England had to come up with some legitimate reason to oppose the Vatican and the Pope and pronounce their Anglican Church the real and only true church. And remember, there was no need for an Anglican church until Henry VIII wanted to get a divorce, and the Pope said no. And that was the beginning of all of this. You see, all of a sudden, King Henry VIII told the Pope to go stick it where the sun don't shine, and he divorced his wife anyway under the Anglican Church. And you all know the story of the opposition in England and what happened to them. And then the British monarchy had to justify all of their actions, and that's when all of a sudden, right then and there, they became descended from the house of David and possessed the only really divine right to rule. Now, how did this happen? Well, folks, sometime in the near future, they're going to say that they've uncovered historical evidence that Christ did not really die upon the cross, that he fathered children with Mary Magdalene. Those children, along with Joseph of Arimathea, Mary Magdalene, and the children and the bones of Jesus Christ were taken from the Middle East to the British Isles and blah, 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 blah. Under the throne of England there is a stone which they claim is Jacob's pillar. And anyway, let me continue with this report. It might take 2 nights to cover this because there's a lot to talk about here. Remember, it's all baloney. None of it is true. One person who is reputed to have contributed to the early development of the British Israel ideology is John.D., a fellow of Trinity College and advisor to Queen Elizabeth, who openly practiced black magic and prophecy. He was among the first to talk of England as an empire. Also, Sir Francis Drake, Elizabeth's favorite pirate, was notoriously partial to describing the fledgling empire of England as Israel and the New Jerusalem. You see, folks, if they can use these terms and convince the rabble, that's you, in case you didn't know that, the socialists call you the masses, if they can convince you that it's all true and you believe in the Bible, then you have to bow down to these people and let them rule you. You see, one of the first mind control operations. The beginning of the 17th century saw the rise of hundreds of cults across Europe. The majority of these, including what would later be known as British Israelism, can be traced to the efforts of Venice's top psychological warfare officer, Paolo Sarpi. Venetian strategic interests demanded that Europe be kept controlled and divided, and that the scientific breakthroughs of the Renaissance and the implication of those breakthroughs for the growth of human mental freedom had to be destroyed. You see, Venice had long learned that manipulation of religion is one of the most potent methods to control societies. Heck, the Pope had known that from the 3rd century, when the Emperor Constantine called the Council of Nicaea, and they sat down and determined what were going to be the books of the Bible, and burned and destroyed and searched out and hid or completely obliterated everything that opposed what they chose to be in the Bible. There was no Bible before that. There's a whole bunch of different books that all were written by different authors that claimed to tell the real history of the religion. Not just the Christian religion, but all the other religions. And the Pope, over the years, combined the early teachings of Christ, the teachings of the early church, with all of the different pagan religions to create what is known today as modern Christianity. He even changed the day of worship from the 7th day, which is Saturday, ladies and gentlemen, to the 1st day, which is the venerable day of the sun, in order to pacify the sun worshippers and bring them under the control of the Catholic Church. Don't think so? Well, get your head out of the books that are written by those who want you to believe in them and start studying the real history of the world, and you'll find out that it's really true. Heck, the Pope even changed the 10 Commandments, which Moses claimed were handed down to him from God. Now that's pretty arrogant, don't you think? Now, I'm not anti-Catholic. I'm just pro-truth. I don't care which religion you worship, as long as you do it in the light of truth. And if you choose to worship a mixture of truth and lies, or all truth, or something in between all of that, I don't care. But all you're ever going to get from me on this broadcast is the truth. I'll fight and die for your right to worship at whatever altar, whatever God you choose. Because that's the only way I know I can have the freedom to worship at the altar and worship my God when and how I choose. You see, if I take your right away from you, I've also taken it from myself. But I've also learned over the years, ladies and gentlemen, that to live in a lie is to live a life already dead. And there is no such thing as choosing the lesser of two evils. Evil is evil. And if you choose evil, whether it's lesser or greater, you are living an evil life. I choose truth. And I hope you do too. See, these Venetian strategies and the interests of the rulers wanted Europe controlled. And they wanted the population divided amongst, or against, I should say, itself, just like today. They foster and promote things that will divide people against each other. They didn't want the scientific breakthroughs of the Renaissance. And any of the implications of those breakthroughs for the growth of human mental freedom to flourish, they had to be destroyed. These things were dangerous to those who ruled. Just like this broadcast is dangerous to those who rule today. What you're hearing on this broadcast, what you always hear on this broadcast, is the reason why William Jefferson Clinton, President of the United States of America, called me the most dangerous radio host in America. If you don't believe that, check around. Rush Limbaugh read it. It was written in a White House memo. Rush Limbaugh got a copy of it, read it on the air, right after the Oklahoma City bombing, in an effort to demonize me and vindicate himself. But whatever the reason, it was the greatest feather in my cap ever. It's a great compliment to me to have been so honored. Venice had long learned that manipulation of religion is one of the most potent methods to control societies. The Roman Empire knew it, used it. It's being used against you today, ladies and gentlemen. Venetian agents had a direct hand in the English King Henry VIII's break with Rome, and in the creation of the Theocratic Church of England, or the Anglican Church. Venice, you see, was crucial to the transformation of Martin Luther's ill-formed movement into a Europe-wide Protestant schism, and Venice was equally pivotal in shaping the Vatican's countermeasures, thus ensuring decades of religious warfare. Martin Luther, whether you realize it or not, used the seal of the Rose and Cross on his correspondence. He was a member of the secret mystery religion known as the Rosicrucians. Within this Venetian onslaught, Paolo Sarpi's particular specialty was science. One of the greatest dangers to the oligarchical world outlook had arisen in the mid-15th century when Nicolaus of Cusa, in effect, founded modern science and threatened to sweep away the mental straitjacket of Aristotelianism. Why did they have to make words? Why did they have to put an ism on Aristotle? Why can't they say the mental straitjacket of Aristotle? Sarpi's job was to repackage Aristotle's discredited method in seductive new ways. Sarpi's primary tool was what we today call empiricism, the insistence that science is not based on creativity, but is merely the discovery of the rules of nature, which we deduce from the facts which impinge upon our senses. Now, Aristotle wasn't a bad guy, and he wasn't discredited. Aristotle was the father of reason, ladies and gentlemen, in case you believe what the EIR said right there. As a skilled intelligence operator, Sarpi did not simply create one ideological package, but several. Then, whichever one took hold could be further sponsored. Some cult variants were designed to appeal to scientists and had little to say about religion. Others were openly religious. Some flavored for Catholics, some for Protestants, and yet others were meant to draw in people who were confused about religion in general. Sarpi relied heavily on the ideas originally developed by Gnosticism. Of course, and a Gnostic would, of course, ladies and gentlemen, say that Aristotle was wrong. Gnosticism was a cult of obscure Eastern origin which held that the universe, including the deity itself, was absolutely divided into spirit and the filthy degeneration of spirit called matter. A key belief of the Gnostics was that transcendence from the world of matter was dependent on secret knowledge. Gnosis means knowledge, which was attainable only by an elite of the sect who had achieved purity and had become born again out of the evil flesh. In other words, the hierarchy of the adepts known as the Illuminati. In the 11th and 12th centuries, Europe had seen large-scale Gnostic heresies, notably the Cathari, or pure ones, and their violent suppression. This Gnostic secret knowledge ideology is what Sarpi and his two famous collaborators, Galileo, Johannes Kepler. Under the Gnostic methodology, science explicitly becomes the same as alchemy, prophecy, or magic, which are all just a matter of hitting upon the right combination of chemicals, the right incantation, the plausible interpretation, or the illusion. This took many forms, including a few which contributed directly, ladies and gentlemen, to British Israelism. Francis Bacon, whom many classify as the founder of modern scientific method, explicitly saw science as nothing more than forcibly wresting from nature the secrets that God, a Gnostic deity containing good as well as evil, has maliciously refused to reveal. Bacon's text, The New Atlantis, which suggested that England could become the site of the new King Solomon's Temple, became the founding document of the British scientific espionage operation known as the Royal Society and the source of what is known as this country as America's secret destiny. It was here that Bacon coined the ominous phrase, quote, knowledge is power, end quote. This original Royal Society held alchemy and ghost hunting on the same scientific level as astronomy and chemistry. Another cult spun out of the Sarpi network, which contributes to many forms of British Israel as well as to Freemasonry and Theosophy, is Rosicrucianism. Martin Luther was a member of that organization. Here again, the earliest origins are obscure and include unverifiable reference to the Crusading Knights Templar, officially the Poor Knights of the Temple of Solomon, and to various satanic cults. I can tell you absolutely that they can be traced right to the door of the Knights Templar. According to Masonic legend, a small group of Knights Templar escaped the Inquisition for the order's practice of the Eastern Baphomet cult, whose initiation rite involved spitting on the visage of Christ, to fight with King David Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, thereby engendering the origins of British Freemasonry and of Rosicrucianism. Within higher order Freemasonry, the degree of Rose-Cross is known as the degree of revenge against the Pope and the French king. Thus the Jacobinites of the Duc d'Orleans, Philip Eagle-Eye, during the French Revolution were known to be followers of Neo-Templarism. Don't go away, folks. We'll be right back after this very short pause while I sort of wet my whistle with a cup of water here. Remember, folks, if you're search for a militia to join, if you find a militia that tells you that you have to be a Christian to be a member of that militia, it's not a militia, it's a religious army. The militia is defined by law. So, and we've given you that law many times on this broadcast. If you want to see it again, go to our website, harvest-trust.org. It's all there. Just go down to the thing that says militia on our home page, click it, the militia page will come up and you'll have hours and hours of stuff to read and do there. Places to go, things to look at. And I hope you do. Hope you've all been to our webpage at least once. You should visit as many times as you possibly can. I mean, you could literally stay on our webpage for weeks and not see and explore everything. That's how big it is. That's how good it is. It's a place for people who want to discover the truth. And here's the name again. All you need is http://harvest-trust.org. Head on out. Take a look at it. See what you think. And then leave a message on our Voices page, which is a forum where you can talk to other people who visit the webpage all across this country. Let me see here. Where was I? Shall endeavor to find my place. Here it is. Notwithstanding their primordial roots, the Rosicrucians strict adherence to a system of esoteric secret knowledge made them grist for Sarpi's Gnostic mill. One of the few solid pieces of evidence we have about Rosicrucianism is that it was popularized in the early 17th century by a book by German theologian Johann Valentin Andrea titled Fama Fraternitatis. That's Fama Fraternitatis. Andrea's book described the fictional activities of one Christian Rosenkreutz, who after studying the magical theories of the East, returned to found a new society. Andrea's book was used as an organizing document by several of Bacon's more occult-oriented contemporaries, including Robert Flood and Sir Elias Ashmole, later the founder of speculative Freemasonry, with its first lodge in London in 1717. The introduction to Fama Fraternitatis is a reprint from the works of Traiano Boccolini, a Venetian theologian and a close friend of Sarpi. I believe that's Boccolini. I believe that's the correct pronunciation. Traiano Boccolini, a Venetian theologian and a close friend of Sarpi, and who also wrote La Bilancia Politica, the first book in history to describe the need for a balance of power to rule Europe. At the same time, Sarpi's operations also encompassed several strictly religious ideologies. Venice had previously encouraged the most extreme Protestant forms, like Calvinism and its English variant, Puritanism, while simultaneously working to harden and militarize Catholicism against them. In the early 17th century, Sarpi's collaborators, like the oligarchical Sandys brothers in England and the legal theorist Hugo Grotius in Holland, began calling for yet a new religion, which would supposedly chart a third way between the extremes of Calvin's theocracy and the Vatican Jesuits. Typically, ladies and gentlemen, this new form would be based on Gnostic-style secret knowledge, the discovery of the original form, the Prisca Theologica, as they called it, of Christianity, before, as they claim, it was deformed by the early church, including St. Paul, and lost to man. Well, at least they're correct in that respect, folks. That's the truth. There is no church, organization, or group on the face of this earth today that calls itself Christian that actually practices what Christ taught and what the early first Christians believed and practiced. And that's the truth. I don't care what you call yourselves, and I don't care how mad this statement makes you, and I don't care how much you hate me for saying it, it is the truth. I was amazed because I was baptized in the Southern Baptist Church in Midwest City, Oklahoma, when I was, 13 years old, I believe. And I believed what they taught me and read the Bible and thought that it was all the way it was supposed to be. And I had been around to other churches, had been to many other religions, as a matter of fact. In my travels with my father as a boy, he was an Air Force officer, and for most of my boyhood, we lived in foreign countries. And so I got a good exposure to most of the religions of the world. I can remember when we lived in the Is.Ra.EL Islands, which are Portuguese. The maid used to take us on Sunday to the Catholic Church. And so I was exposed to these things. It wasn't until I really began researching the history of the world, and believe me, folks, I did not want to find what I found. I was not looking to prove myself or my religion wrong. Not at that time. Today I'm looking for the truth. I don't care what gets proven wrong, because I've learned that most of us live our entire lives in a complete fantasy, in a complete deception of lies and manipulations without even knowing it, never looking to see if it's true or not. Most of us belong to the church we belong to simply because our parents did, or as a young and impressionable age we were proselytized or recruited into it. And usually when we're recruited into it, we're not told the truth. We find that out sometime later. Very few people who belong to any church in this world today ever set out to study all the different religions and churches and theosophy and theology and mystical, or I should say mysticism, in order to find out which one is really telling the truth and which one is really the right one for them to belong to. It doesn't happen. Whatever church they end up in becomes the only right church with the only correct dogma and the only right message and the only path to heaven. Everybody else is going to hell. Isn't that the way it works? Isn't that the way it works, ladies and gentlemen? And of course, every preacher and every member of his church can pick Bible passages out of context to support whatever it is that they say is right. Without fail, they can all do that. See, I don't think that if the Bible is the inspired Word of God, that God would want it ever to be used in that manner, to tell you the truth. The writer Edwin Sandys even stated that this new religion should be an amalgamation of the Church of England, plus the kind of Catholicism then practiced in places like Venice. Much of the religious history of 17th century England can be characterized as various factions' attempts to decipher the secrets of the Bible and revive the, quote, old-time religion, end quote. Indeed, much of the original theology of such modern groups as the Quakers, the Pietists, and the Unitarians derives from these debates. And if anybody ever got close, it's the Quakers. This is a major reason why the Cromwellian Revolution of the mid-century saw intense public debates over biblical texts that might be used to proclaim that English law was in conformity with the laws of the Israelites and allowed the Roundheads to claim that London was the new Jerusalem. Oliver Cromwell's offer to let the Jews return to England after centuries of exile, ladies and gentlemen, was not humanitarian. And Oliver Cromwell did not all of a sudden come up with some great love for Jews. It was made in the hope that the Jews could somehow reveal their biblical secrets and that somehow this action would give legitimacy to the claim of the royal house of England to be direct descendants of the house of David and the real Israel. John Milton's intense study of the Kabbalah and other Jewish esoteric texts was to the same end. And the Kabbalah, ladies and gentlemen, has become the basic tenet of the secret religion of all of the so-called secret fraternal orders and secret societies of the world. Even after the monarchy was restored in 1660, the debate merely intensified. Typical is Sir Isaac Newton, who was devoted to the search for Prisca Theologica, a Freemason in the tradition of Sir Elias Ashmole. Newton studied alchemy and corresponded with John Locke on the subject. Like Archbishop James Ussher at the beginning of the century, Newton claimed to have divined the secret chronology of the Bible. In his book, The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms, Newton presented a scheme for the rebuilding of Solomon's Temple. Many of Newton's last years were spent writing notes for a book of prophecy based on the revelation of St. John, in which he described the ultimate destruction of the Antichrist, by which he meant the Roman Pope. By Newton's time, England had not only taken over the oligarchy's imperial mantle from Venice, it had also become the cult center of the world. And just as Sarpi had planned, the corruption of the religious belief was vital to the corruption of scientific understanding. A very large reason why Newton's empiricist theories became so widespread was that they conformed to the new corrupt theologies. Indeed, the English clergy and their colleagues became Newton's greatest popularizers. The one person who fully understood this was the greatest scientist of his day, Gottfried Leibniz. When the Royal Society realized that they must use Newton to destroy Leibniz's influence and began an international defamation campaign, Leibniz responded in a famous series of letters to Newton's friend Dr. Samuel Clarke. And it is telling that Leibniz opened what was to be one of the great works of science with the line, quote, "Natural religion itself seems to be declining in England," end quote. Understatement, don't you think? There are millions of Americans, ladies and gentlemen, who are now involved in Pentecostal, charismatic, and millennialist religious activity, including some who may be reading this right now. Having good feelings about those activities is not enough. That can be pure salesmanship. Simply knowing that your group is involved in good works is not enough. The New Testament warns against that kind of thinking. There are a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing these days, demanding that you look beneath the surface and find out what are the core beliefs of your congregation. You may be shocked to find that your co-religionists have ideas which make it impossible for them to understand any kind of real research on this issue. Ask your minister or your priest or your friends and find out. Start a fight and do it intentionally, because that's how the truth comes out. Very quickly, you will see some lies flung out in defense. The single most important test is what your congregation believes about man being in the image of God. This point is often taken for granted because the Scripture tells us that God made man and woman in His image, and therefore, if you believe Scripture, you believe that. Not so. There's a lot of Protestant denominations that believe that Adam and Eve were made in the image of God, but that this image was hopelessly tarnished after their fall. Therefore, some say only the saved are truly in the image of God, and the rest of humanity are second-class souls. Now, this kind of thinking often afflicts the person who is loudly opposed to anything that would take a life before birth, theoretically saving an elected soul, but who cannot muster much care for those lazy souls that God has apparently abandoned to their fate. And another important clue to what your congregation really believes can be found in their understanding of the role of reason in the worship of God. For instance, many people who call themselves fundamentalists become quite agitated at the mention of Philo, the Jewish philosopher of Alexandria, of the church father Augustine, the best-selling apocalyptics Hal Lindsey and John.the have both written tracts against Philo because the Platonic philosopher proved that any attempt at scriptural prophecy was a narcissistic and impious attempt to make God conform to man's schedule. Scripture, said Philo, was a metaphor, and I've said it many times on this broadcast. It's true, subject to a deepening interpretation as man grows in understanding. Augustine usually gets a blast for subscribing to Philo on this and related points. But what really perturbs the apocalyptics is Philo's and Augustine's absolute insistence that worship can never be irrational. As Philo beautifully puts it, God insists that His worshippers offer Him only the first fruits. And for man, says Philo, that first fruits to be offered must be our creative reason. That's a sidebar written by Michael Minnesina. Although the preconditions for British Israelism were rampant in England, the first formal statement of the ideology did not occur until the 1790s, when Richard Brothers, a Royal Navy officer who had fought against America in the Revolutionary War, began to write that England was not just theoretically the New Jerusalem, but that the English people themselves were descended from the lost tribes of Israel, and that they must restore the temple in Palestine. Now you see how it's transcended here? First the British people were just the British people. Then all of a sudden, when Henry VIII could not get a divorce, he broke from the Catholic Church and had to have a reason why his church could exist and was superior to the Pope. That reason was that the monarchy was descended from the house of David, and that England was, ladies and gentlemen, the actual 10 lost tribes of Israel, and London was the new Jerusalem. None of it true. Later, a British sea captain says that it is the English people themselves. Never mind that there was never any lost tribes of Israel. They can all be accounted for. Every one of them, folks. And he said that they must restore the temple in Palestine. The time for such theory was not ripe. Brothers was suspected of being a radical and was ultimately confined to an insane asylum. But his philosophy is exactly what has been adopted. And now it's not just the English people, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Aryan race, comprising all the Anglo-Aryan peoples of the Northern European continent, and all of those descended from those people who occupied the North American continent in the United States of America and Canada. So it's gone through 3 stages. But we're only at the second stage here in what we're studying. Oh, I bet there's some angry people out there. I bet they're really just seething. They don't like me. One night, ladies and gentlemen, here's my lineage. I'm English, Scotch, Irish, Native American. My wife is Chinese. My children are English, Scotch, Irish, Native American, and Chinese. Okay? I'm not Jewish. I'm not Hebrew. Never claimed to be. There's nobody in my family tree that we can find who is Hebrew or Jewish whatsoever. If I were, I would be just as proud of that as I am of being Native American, English, Scotch, and Irish. And I would be just as proud that my children would have that blood in them, because people are just people, folks, until they're sucked into these scams and manipulations, and it's used to control them, and then they use it to control others, and then they become bad and evil people. You see? But one night, Pastor Pete Peters, one of the biggest leaders of the British Israelist movement in the United States and what's called a Christian identity, did a whole radio broadcast about how me and anyone else who criticized British Israelism in this country are Jews. And he even had a phone call from somebody who said that he had read my book, and in my book is a picture of my mother and father. He said, my mother and father look like Jews, therefore I must be a Jew and they're Jews. Well, my mother and father don't look like Jews. There is a stereotyped image of Jewry. Some Jews fit that a little or a lot. Most Jews look like everybody else walking down the street, and you wouldn't be able to tell them apart, no matter if you had a divining rod and a crystal ball. That's the truth. But anyway, my mother and father don't fit that stereotype, neither do I. And most Jews don't either, ladies and gentlemen. The point is that these people are just absolutely rabid in the methods that they use to pull anything out of thin air that will legitimize their position when they can't sit down and prove it with facts and argue it with reason. And so since I've been one of their greatest critics ever since I discovered who they were, when they sent me bushels and bushels of hate mail, threatening to kill me and my wife and my children, labeling me as a race traitor, saying my children were mongrels and that they were fourth-rate animal people, and what do they call them? Mud people. Called my children mud people, and said that they should be exterminated, and they had no intelligence whatsoever. And every time I see these people, I see their children. It's amazing that my daughter could read when she was 3 years old. She's 7 now and reads better than most high school graduates, college graduates, I meant to say, and I mean that sincerely. And when I see these people, their excuse for not having their children already brought up to that level is that they're not old enough. Good night, folks. I just can't do this anymore. We'll continue where I left off tomorrow night, and we'll see what happens then, okay? Don't you think this is interesting? God bless each and every single one of you. Don't miss tomorrow night's broadcast. We've got a lot more to cover. We just barely scratched the surface, folks. That's the truth. One of the claims by British Israelites is that they're being exterminated through forced marriage to mud people, meaning, of course, other races. I've never seen that, have you? You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Today is January the 12th, 1998. And the world is not in good shape, ladies and gentlemen. This nation is not in good shape. You are very quickly losing your heritage, losing your liberties, your freedom. Your children are losing their opportunities that so many Americans died to hand down to their posterity, or so they thought. I want you to make good note of tonight's broadcast. It is a continuation of that which we did on Friday. This one will be the clarifying mixture, I suspect. And for those of you who don't understand any of it, if you're a Christian and you want to know the truth, just go to the New Testament and read only the words in red. Don't bother with any other word in the whole book. Read only the words in red, where they will lead you to the right path and to the gate, which is narrow. You see, everybody spends so much time allowing themselves, and when I say allowing, I mean it wholeheartedly, for it's the truth, allowing themselves to be grasped in the coils of deception. If you're a Christian, you know that the great deceiver, the great liar, the great manipulator is called Satan. If you want to know where Satan resides, if you want to know who he is, look around and see who is telling you all the lies. It's as simple as that. Who's lying to you, entrapping you, deceiving you, manipulating you, entrapping you, wrapping the coils of the serpent around you? And of course, if you're not a Christian, you're some other religion. The same thing applies, ladies and gentlemen, even if you don't believe in a Satan. Lies and deception and manipulation are wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong. And the only people who practice those things are evil people. You see, they have to lie to you, deceive you, and manipulate you, because if they told you the truth, you would throw them into prison and lock them up forever. Now, if you're a Christian and you want to know the truth, go to the red words in the Bible. Don't bother reading any other word in the whole book. They will confuse you. And when you're listening to someone preaching from a pulpit, go look up the red words in the book and see what Jesus Christ himself said. If you're not a Christian, find out who's telling the lies. And do it honestly, leaving your preconceived notions, your prejudices, and your own agenda behind you when you look for the truth. For if you're looking to prove something that you already believe, you will only find evidence to support it. You will not ever discover the truth. The truth is so important, for this is the age of deception. Almost everyone in the world today is leading a life of fantasy, lies, deception, and they are being manipulated by the fathers, the perpetrators, the inventors of those lies. For instance, I really don't have to spend hours on this British Israelite master race, God's chosen people, all this other kind of stuff thing. All I have to do is quote one thing that Jesus Christ himself said. for all of this is being manipulated in Christianity and Zionism. And it's all a lie. Jesus Christ said, "Whosoever shall believeth in me shall have everlasting life." He didn't say anything about whosoever that belongs to the Anglo-Saxon Aryan race that believeth in me shall have everlasting life. He didn't say that. He didn't say whosoever is descended from the house of David and believeth in me shall have everlasting life. He didn't say whoever is black and believeth in me shall have everlasting life. He didn't say any of that, did he? And if you don't believe in Christianity and the Bible, then you have to understand that if you submit to the concept of a master race, if you are of that race, then you are just trying to make yourself feel better and elevate yourself above the rest of humanity. And when you do that, there's nothing masterful about you. It actually lowers you in comparison to the rest of the human race. Understand that. Make sure you take notes. Open your eyes today, hopefully, like they've never been opened, and maybe spare you a lot of pain, a lot of living in fantasy, a lot of manipulation. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, none of this British Israelism stuff ever surfaced in the entire history of the world until King Henry VIII wanted to divorce his wife and found out that the Pope would not let him. So King Henry VIII divorced all of England and himself from the Catholic Church, from the Pope, founded the Anglican Church, and then it became necessary to justify his actions to the world, to the English people in specific, and to be able to make it stick. Somewhere down the line, the Royal House of England invented a family tree connecting them directly by descendants to the Royal House of David, and thus to the Old Testament, the lineage of the divine right to rule, or so they claim. Later, they claimed that all of England, not just the royal house, but all of England, this came later, folks, it was not there in the beginning, all of England were the descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel, which according to the Bible were never lost at all, and are not lost today. And that London was the New Jerusalem. And then later, they extended that to the entire Anglo-Saxon race, cutting off the German peoples, claiming that the ancient Aryans were the enemies of the state of Israel, or the race of Israel, as they have come to make it. And then later, forgot all about that, and reabsorbed the Aryan, so now it's the Aryan Anglo-Saxon American people. Discounting the original Native Americans, of course. And we'll take off from there. Still, from the Strategic Studies of the Executive Intelligence Review, dated November the 14th, 1997. Although the preconditions for British Israelism were rampant in England, the first formal statement of the ideology did not occur until the 1790s, when Richard Brothers, a Royal Navy officer who had fought against America in the Revolutionary War, began to write that England was not just theoretically the New Jerusalem, but that the English people themselves were descended from the lost tribes of Israel, and that they must restore the temple in Palestine. The time for such theory was not ripe, and Brothers was suspected of being a radical and was ultimately confined to an insane asylum, which is exactly what they should be doing with Pastor Pete Peters and all of these other people who are propounding this nonsense to the world and sucking a lot of innocent people into the coils of that old serpent. Around 1840, however, a decision was made somewhere at the Colonial Office, or the East India Company headquarters, to revive Sarpi's old method of religious manipulation, and the next few years would see the rise of two interrelated cults which would become a major weapon in British foreign policy. First, Irish clergyman John Nelson Darby started publishing texts which he claimed decoded the secrets of the Bible and prophetically laid out the fast-approaching apocalypse. Darby's theories, which we today call pre-millennial dispensationalism, had several striking components. Number one, the millennial kingdom of Christ will sweep away all civilization, and the only people saved will be a tiny group of elect who will be raptured physically into the new kingdom. Two, the evil power in the world is Gog, spelled G-O-G, as identified in Ezekiel, who will sweep down on Israel and begin the end days. Darby confidently identified Gog as Russia. And three, the end will come only when the Scripture is fulfilled and the Jews return to Israel and build the temple. How did the state of Israel come into existence, ladies and gentlemen? Check your history. Almost simultaneously, one John Wilson picked up the theories of Richard Brothers and published Lectures on Our Israelitish Origin in 1840, claiming, also on the evidence of biblical secret knowledge, that the 10 tribes migrated to Europe after the destruction of the Second Temple, primarily turning into Christian Englishmen and Germans. The racially inferior tribes of Judah, said Wilson, remained in Palestine and became the modern Jews, and they believed that and preached that for a long time. And today, they say the Jews that call themselves Jews today and speak Hebrew and practice the ancient Hebrew religious ceremonies and holidays are not Jews at all. Are not Jews at all. They're not even from the tribe of Judah now today. See, these people change their story about every 20 years. No, they're really folks from some weird tribe in the mountains of what used to be called the old Soviet Union. Khazars is the name. The British Israelites claim there are no real Jews alive today. I know a lot of real Jews who find that extremely shocking. And they're not Khazars. They're the real descendants of the real Israelites and the real 10 tribes. They are of the race known as Shemites, or Semites, which include the Arab people also. So we went from their teaching that the racially inferior tribes of Judah remained in Palestine and became the modern Jews. That flies in the face of everything they say. Because if you've studied the history of the Middle East, you know that the state of Israel was not that ruled, ladies and gentlemen, by the house of David. The house of David was of the tribe of Judah. The house of David and the tribe of Judah warred against and conquered the state of Israel. That's the true history of the region. Yet these people claim that they have the divine right to rule, and they are superior race to all of the people because they are descended from the house of David and the original Hebrew race from the state of Israel, the ancient country of Israel, which wasn't a country that encompassed all of the 10 tribes of Israel. There were several small countries, the most powerful of which emerged as the tribe and the country of Judah and conquered all the rest under the house of David. Don't believe it? Look it up. These people are so confused they can't even find their way to a library and a history book. Both of these bizarre theories were sponsored by the British oligarchy because they exactly fit the Crown's policy requirements. Darby's identification of Russia would be crucial to drumming up support for the war against the country which the British would shortly provoke in the Crimea. Wilson's biblically sanctioned friendship with the Germans was also British policy. The fraud of the whole thing is exposed when slightly later British foreign policy turned against the Germans. Immediately, Wilson's organization was factionalized, and it was discovered by the winning faction that the Germans were actually, get this folks, the racial heirs of the Assyrians, the ancient enemy of Israel, and therefore the enemy of British Israel. The Germans, of course, have always claimed descendancy from what they call the Aryans of India. Actually, it's a term that was invented by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. And both Darbyites and the British Israelites provided invaluable assistance in firmly turning the attention of the British population to Palestine and the need for the rebuilding of the temple. The timing was crucial. In 1840, British Foreign Secretary Lord Palmerston had unofficially committed the British Empire to Zionism. That's no secret. I've been telling you that for many, many years. And the creation of a British-controlled entity in Palestine. And that, folks, is the real secret to the creation of the state of Israel in the Middle East. On the one hand, Britain needed to ensure that the increasing chaos in the Ottoman Empire did not invite other great powers from developing influence there. On the other, it needed to protect the land routes to India and its growing colonial empire. It also, ladies and gentlemen, would give people who believe in the prophecies of the Bible in the book of Revelation the belief that prophecy was being fulfilled, and would further elevate the British Israelites as the superior or master race in the world. This became official policy in 1845, with a colonial office report proposing, quote, the establishment of a Jewish nation in Palestine as a protected state under the guardianship of Great Britain, end quote. Such a state, the report concluded, quote, would place us in a commanding position in the Levant from whence to check the process of encroachment, to overawe our enemies, and, if necessary, repel their advance, end quote. The Crown's case officer for this project was Anthony Ashley Cooper, the 7th Earl Shaftesbury, a pious oligarch who combined aspects of both the Darbyites and the British Israelites, cleaned them up for general consumption, and became the leading spokesman for a plan to resettle Jews back in Israel. Shaftesbury's high church version of British Israelism, as well as the various low church versions, grew through the 19th century. Queen Victoria's daughter, Princess Alice, became a patroness of the movement. In 1862, the Prince of Wales and future King Edward VII made a tour of the Holy Land, the first English royal to set foot there since 1270. In 1865, Shaftesbury's efforts came to fruition with the founding of the Palestine Exploration Fund, known as PEF, under the official patronage of the Queen. The PEF brought together funding from the Rothschilds and the United Grand Lodge of Freemasons. There's those Freemasons again. Membership ranged from oligarchs to apocalyptic crazies. And again, Religion made a brilliant cover for espionage and colonial manipulation. Nominally charged with surveying the Mideast so that the country could be restored by the Jews to its ancient prosperity, the Palestine Expeditionary Force spent its time subverting the Ottoman governor and making the maps that the British Army would use in the area in World War I. One of PEF's leading explorers in Palestine from 1867 to 1870 was General Sir Charles Warren. According to British author Stephen Knight, Warren, who had been Commissioner of London's Metropolitan Police and a Freemason, oversaw the cover-up of the Jack the Ripper murders, protecting both the United Grand Lodge of Freemasons and the fact that the Prince of Wales had had an illegitimate heir by a prostitute. The Chief of Criminal Investigations on the case for Scotland Yard was Sir Robert Anderson, who was a follower of John Nelson Darby. Warren is credited by Masonic sources with virtually rediscovering the project of rebuilding Solomon's Temple. He founded the Quatuor Coronati Lodge 2076, which, under the guise of being the, quote, research lodge, end quote, within the United Grand Lodge of England, has been active to this day, collaborating with Zionists in attempts to create holy war in the Middle East by blowing up the Muslim shrine Haram al-Sharif on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem in order to rebuild Solomon's Temple. Ironically, when the Quatuor Coronati Lodge succeeded in taking over Theosophy, it spun off the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, run by the satanic SIS officer Aleister Crowley, who was a major influence upon the Thule Society that gave birth to Adolf Hitler's movement and much of the intercult belief structure of the Allgemeine SS. If you study the history of Nazi Germany, you'll find that it came right out of the occult lodges of the Thule Society and Freemasonry. In 1919, the 40-odd British Israelite organizations were consolidated into the British Israel World Federation, also known as BIWF, which today spans the British Empire and permeates the United States. The first patrons of the BIWF were the Marchioness of Hereford and Admiral Sir Richard Pierce. This consolidation followed two developments that were the work of British leaders who had been influenced by British Israelism. The first was the 1917 conquest of Palestine and entry into Jerusalem by Field Marshal Lord Allenby, which was intended to achieve a Palestinian mandate for the British Empire at the Versailles Peace Conference. The second, which sought to give an imaginative purpose to a British mandate, was the Balfour Declaration backing, quote, the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, end quote. The Balfour Declaration was nowhere more joyously celebrated than in the Darbyite and British Israelite congregations in England and America. But the joy had little to do with the Jewish people. Indeed, these people didn't believe that the Jewish people were really the Jews. So why set up a country for people that they did not believe were the Jews to rebuild the Temple of Solomon in order to bring their prophecy to pass and raise them, elevate them to the position of master race with the royal family of England identified as the only direct descendants of the truly holy bloodline with the divine right to rule, related to Jesus Christ, who was also of the house of David. You see how these lies and this manipulation works? While saying that the Jewish people are not really the Jewish people, they want to recreate the state of Israel with the Jewish people that they claim are the subrace. I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, these people are sick. Literally sick, mentally ill. Except for the ones who are really inventing the lies and pulling the strings and doing the real manipulating. They know exactly what they're doing. And there's nothing insane about them at all. They don't believe their own lies. They just believe that it's going to carry them into a world government that they will then rule. And that's what you need to really understand. For that's really the heart and soul of all of this. The common man has never been told the truth throughout the history of the world, except by a very few people. And when those very few people told the common man the truth, they generally did not ever believe them, choosing instead to believe the lies. I find it absolutely amazing, for the truth, elusive though it may be, can be found by anyone who wants to take the time to look for it. The so-called patriot community in the United States of America and some militia organizations are permeated with these people who call themselves Christian identity or British Israelites. There is nothing patriotic about them. They exist solely to be manipulating and destroying the United States of America and the Christianity which they claim to be so much a part of. And that's the truth of the matter. These are truly subversive organizations and are not in the best interest of anyone who believes truly in liberty and freedom for all people, regardless of race, religion, or point of ancestral origin. The consolidation that took place in 1919, uniting the 40-odd British Israelite organizations, followed two developments that were the work of British leaders who had been influenced by British Israelism. The first was the 1917 conquest of Palestine and entry into Jerusalem by Field Marshal Lord Allenby. The result, ladies and gentlemen, was the ultimate formation of the State of Israel, to be peopled by the very people that the British Israelites claimed were not the Jews. This Balfour Declaration, that was the precedent for all that followed, was celebrated in the Darbyite and British Israelite congregations in England and America, but the joy had little to do with the Jewish people, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, they didn't even believe they were the Jewish people, but imposters, as they tell you today. Mud people, as they called them. Indeed, many of these celebrants were anti-Semites who would soon join the revived Ku Klux Klan. The issue was the final fulfillment of the biblical prophecy, and then the end of the world, these people said. But I tell you, that's not going to happen either, because that's not what Jesus Christ said, is it? He didn't say there was going to be an end of the world. Neither does the original Bible. And every Bible that says it's going to be the end of the world is a mistranslation. The original word in the Greek and the Hebrew means age. It will be the end of the age. Both British Israelism and Darby's prophetic apocalypticism were surprisingly welcome in America. Since both contained a Gnostic core belief, they were not altogether foreign to the theological ideas of many transplanted Puritans. Large factions of the American Puritans could easily be classed as Gnostics. Some early Puritan settlers even came up with a version of Israelism and believed that Native Americans were among the lost tribes of Israel. You know that is the Mormon Church, or the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. And again, folks, I don't care what religion you belong to. That's up to you, as long as you belong to it in the truth. As long as you know the truth and you choose to still believe it anyway, I'll fight and die for your right to worship at that altar. It only becomes bad when you, in believing your religion, try to foist your religion on the rest of us. Make us conform to your worldview. Try to make everyone who believes in liberty and freedom eat and drink and think and live and sleep and bow down to whoever you bow down to. That's wrong. And I don't care what religion it is that you belong to. I'm talking to everybody listening to this broadcast. Everybody. Live your life. Believe what you wish. Worship at whatever altar you wish. I will support that even unto death. I will not support your attempting to take away my liberties and freedom to invoke whatever your particular religion or belief believes should be my government or my life. That I will oppose also unto death. The idea that there was the remnant of the lost tribes of Israel in America was sufficiently widespread that it had to be attacked by Cotton Mather, the Puritan humanist. Right or wrong, this is the history of it. The continued effect of Puritan forms of Gnosticism and its use by Britain can be seen in the work of Jonathan Edwards, who started the first big wave of revivalism in the first half of the 18th century. After studying Locke's psychological doctrines, Edwards came up with his own theory of religious affections. The realization that rhetorically conjuring up horrific images of hellfire might have a dramatic effect on susceptible minds, his famous sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, with images of the sinner's soul as a tiny spider held by a thread over a pit of everlasting torture, created a preaching format still used today. All of that emerged from a well-known classic known as Dante's Inferno, the concept of a hell where there is a perpetual fire burning the souls of sinners did not exist until that book was published. Edwards' Great Awakening succeeded in creating mass hysteria in large parts of the Northeast, coming into direct conflict with American leaders like Benjamin Franklin and other followers of Cotton Mather, who wanted to fire up the population to build a nation. Edwards' son-in-law was Aaron Burr, the murderer of Alexander Hamilton, who presided over the American chapter of the British Hellfire Club, the secret society devoted to the philosophy of Bernard de Mandeville, who argued against any interference by the state in private vices, no matter how satanic. And that is the identifying mark of an illuminist. It was Burr who saw that Edwards was made president of the House of Orange's Princeton University. Now, folks, neither Darbyism nor Israelism were very popular in themselves in America through the 19th century, although the British attempted unsuccessfully to capitalize on biblical prophecies about Russia, known as the evil Gog, to undermine Abraham Lincoln's Civil War alliance with Russia. Many of you know nothing about that. At the turn of the 20th century, coinciding with the British efforts to bring America into a strategic alliance, both premillennial dispensationalism and British Israelism began to expand. Most of you don't understand that England sided with the South during the Civil War, hoping to split the United States of America in half so that England could eventually reconquer this continent. Britain supplied a constant stream of preachers for United States prophecy conferences, whose message was that the secrets of the Scripture were being decoded and were coming to pass, that wars and rumors of wars portended the Jewish return, the tribulation, and the rapture. The Darbyite theories were assembled in a series of pamphlets, several edited in England, called The Fundamentals, a Testimony of Truth. Far from it. These pamphlets, which included the statement that although man was originally made in the image of God, he had lost that honor by Adam's sin, circulated in the millions in the United States. Indeed, the reason why many Protestant evangelicals and apocalyptics are called fundamentalists is that they adhered to the fundamentals described in these pamphlets. Meanwhile, British Israelism grew. The first American organization based on the writings of Edward Hines, the reigning British Israelite, was the 1879 Lost Israel Identification Society of Brooklyn, created by Joseph Wilde, the pastor of Brooklyn's Union Congregationalist Church. In 1883, C.A.L. Totten, who was a United States Army officer, wrote, "Palestine regained are the relation of our race to the race of Israel, the means toward the end." That writing was based on the work of Hine, who toured the Northeast for 4 years, starting in 1884. And a clue to its agenda is the end sentence of the subtitle, "The Means Toward the End." There were two American delegates to the 1919 founding of the BIWF in London, namely J.H. Allen and Portland, Oregon pastor Reuben Sawyer. The latter was a Darbyite who came to incorporate British Israel into his views. Sawyer was replaced as the United States representative to the BIWF by Howard Rand, a lawyer who ran for Attorney General of Massachusetts on the Prohibition Party ticket. In 1930, Rand founded the BIWF-affiliated Anglo-Saxon Federation of America, which soon had chapters all across the United States. There has been an intermingling of British Israelism with major Protestant evangelical denominations ever since that time. For example, Garner Ted Armstrong, the founder of the Worldwide Church of Christ, preached that the Anglo-Saxon Celtic race was the true Israelites, and that the British sovereign was descended from King David. Upon his death, his church split between adherents of British Israelism and those who believed in, quote, the rapture, end quote. Likewise, Billy Graham, who founded the Evangelistic Association, got his first training from a British Israelite named Mordecai Ham. Graham rose to prominence after his revival meetings in Britain, where he became associated with such British Israelite influence notables as Lord Home of the Herschel. Graham's writings were published by the leading BIWF geopolitician Kenneth Hugh de Courcy in his publication Religious Review. Although Graham seeks to keep it hidden, some of his closest advisors practice Kabbalistic biblical prophecy from the signs of the time. Another offshoot of British Israelism that has permeated the United States, posing a significant national security problem, and that is no exaggeration, is the Identity Church. It agrees that the Anglo-Saxon Celtic race is the true Israelites, but differs from the BIWF by proclaiming the Jews to be descended from Eve's mating with the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Identity has significant influence within a number of paramilitary groups and in the militias. Some few militias, ladies and gentlemen. Don't denigrate or condemn the militias, for only a very few are affected by this cancer. And you can tell exactly which ones they are. They'll tell you that you can't be a true American or belong to the militia unless you are a Christian, and specifically Christian identity person. So they're not hard to pinpoint. That makes them not militias, but religious armies. The true militia, ladies and gentlemen, is defined in the law of every state and of the United States of America. There are an awful lot of so-called patriots, however, who are Christian identity British Israelites. These people also believe that Hitler was right, and that Hitler's Third Reich was the promise and should have been allowed to come about. Hitler's one of their big heroes, and they include the Aryan race, as does the modern British Israelite movement anyway, and in England, even after having said that they were not part of the original 10 tribes of Israel, but were the Assyrian enemies of the tribes of Israel, and now they are once again of the tribes of Israel. You see, it's all convenient. Too convenient. This Christian identity also has significant influence, ladies and gentlemen, with factions within the United States intelligence community, the Central Intelligence Agency, and military units such as the Special Forces, one famous member of which was Lieutenant Colonel James Bo Gratz, who is one of the biggest Trojan horses that exists in this country today. This influence of British Israel upon paramilitary and patriot organizations in the United States is long-standing. William Pellet, who founded the Silver Shirts in imitation of the Nazi Sturmabteilung, or SA, in the 1930s, was one such case. Others include Reverend Gerald L.K. Smith, who created the American Destiny Foundation, and then formed the paramilitary California Anti-Communist League. Reverend Wesley Smith, who founded two paramilitary groups, the California Rangers and the Christian Defense League. Lieutenant Colonel William Potter Gale, retired, who first worked with Swift's Defense League, then broke off to found the Posse Comitatus, and so forth. And that brings us to Kenneth Hugh DeCourcy. Mr. DeCourcy subsequent excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. I need to get a little drink of water here. DeCourcy, a protege of British SIS Chief Sir Stuart Menzies, was born November 6th in 1909. He was the son of the claimant to the title of the 8th Duc de Grantmesnil, which is a dubious title of Anglo-Norman origin, nonetheless given credence as an honorary by de Bret's peerage. DeCourcy has had numerous high-level associates, within the Club of the Isles, and he is one of the leading apologists for the House of Windsor's involvement in the drive to impose Adolf Hitler upon a prostate Germany for a drive to the east against Russia. Among his Club of the Isles friends who were involved in the project were His Royal Highness George Duke of Kent, who was also a leader of the United Grand Lodge of England, and King Edward VIII, who was forced to abdicate because of his pro-Nazi views, when by 1936 a faction of the Club of the Isles had come to see Hitler as a dangerous Frankenstein monster. DeCourcy remained faithful to the Duke of Windsor, even after the Duke was known to have entered into negotiations with Hitler to be restored to the throne of England by the Wehrmacht. DeCourcy was very close to the evangelical Lord Home of the Hersel, who was with Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain at Munich. However, the egotist Kenneth Hugh DeCourcy made the mistake of placing some of his records on file at the Hoover Institution's archives, including a document he claims he wrote in Wormwood Scrubs prison while serving a sentence there for financial fraud. This document concerns his own role in the escape of convicted Soviet spy and suspected British triple agent George Blake in October 1966. Some United States intelligence sources believe that Blake did more damage to United States interests than British triple agent H.A.R. Kim Philby, whom you've all heard of. In his latest prophecy appearing in the pages of Corsi's Intelligence Digest and Special Office, he is once again claiming that there will be a renewed Middle East war by 1998, that's this year, that will escalate into World War III. And ladies and gentlemen, if you could see all of the information that I gather here from all of my people worldwide, I would not reject that as an offhand, ridiculous statement. It's very possible, and it could actually occur. According to DeCourcy, Russia is assisting Iran and Syria to prepare for such a war through the transfer of nuclear technology. In order to save Israel, the British will have to rely upon the United States arsenal to obliterate the Russian-Syrian-Iranian alliance. Should President Bill Clinton, who DeCourcy states hates Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, balk at this escalation, then the British will destroy Clinton by playing their trump card, 60 million evangelicals in the United States. The situation is such that Netanyahu may himself launch a preemptive nuclear strike. Otherwise, DeCourcy said that China was doing everything it could to maneuver Russia into an alliance with Iran for the forthcoming Middle East war. The reason is that Russia is extremely weak militarily. It has only its strategic missile capability left after having decimated its other military units, and that's what they want the world to believe. It is not true, ladies and gentlemen. If there is a new Middle East war, then he foresees China might move to take eastern Russia, which he claims has been a long-term goal. It would be impossible, given China's vast population and territorial depth, for it to be conquered by Russia or by anybody else for that matter. Of course, his latest prophecy is a reliable expression of the viewpoint of a powerful faction within the Club of the Isles. As a leader of BIWF in London pointed out, King George VI had his genealogical chart traced back to King David, and he educated his daughters in British Israelism, including his heir, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Now, who you going to believe, folks? For I tell you that everyone who believes in this scam of British Israelism or Christian identity is, in effect, and in reality, calling Jesus Christ a liar. If you don't believe that, listen to their version of the world's history, and then go read the words in red in your Bible. Jesus said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." He didn't say, "Suffer the little white children to come unto me." He did not say, "Suffer the little Anglo-Saxon Aryan children to come unto me." He did not say, "Suffer the little black children to come unto me," or the little red children, or the little yellow children. He said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me." He said, "Whosoever believeth in me shall have everlasting life." He said a lot of other things, ladies and gentlemen, all that say the same thing. That he was, if you're a Christian, and you must believe this if you're a Christian, he was the salvation of all humanity. He was the end of all pain and suffering. He was the standard around which all people, rich and poor, sick, healthy, lame, black, white, yellow, red, purple, green, I don't care, to end all of the wars and bring about God's kingdom on this earth. Anybody who tells you anything different from that is calling Jesus Christ a liar. If you don't believe me, you read his own words in red in the Holy Bible. If you don't believe in Christianity, or even in any other religion, the answer to the problems of the world is not the Mormon Church. It is not the Southern Baptist Church. It is not the Seventh-day Adventists. It is not the Presbyterians. It is not British Israelism. It is not atheism. It is simply to follow the teachings and the admonishments of the greatest men who've ever lived upon the face of this earth, one of which was Jesus Christ, who told us the truth, and we haven't listened yet. And even though we have his words at our disposal, within arm's reach in almost every home or in every library throughout the world, people still go and listen to these lies and believe them, go back and read that Jesus Christ contradicted every single thing that these people are teaching you, and you still don't understand it. Can't get it through your head. He said, "Wheresoever you shall gather in my name, there shall I be also." He did not say, "Wheresoever you who are Anglo-Saxon Aryan gather in my name, there I will be also." Or there shall I be also. He didn't say that. He didn't put black in there. He didn't put yellow in there. He didn't put red in there. All of these people are using you. They're lying to you. Once again, they're deceiving you and manipulating you into hating each other and accomplishing the exact opposite of what Jesus Christ set out to accomplish. And so if you call yourself a Christian, you must reject these things, but you must not believe me just because I say it. You go to your Bible And don't you dare read any other word except those printed in red. Or if you're a Christian, those are the only ones that matter. No other word in that entire Bible matters save those words. Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and God bless each and every single one of you.